Good morning. My name is Patrick Duray. I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Automotive Repair, and I want to welcome everyone to the third quarterly Bar Advisory Group meeting. We are meeting at the Department of Consumer Affairs headquarters building number 1, here at 1625 North Market Boulevard. I hope everyone has had a good years thus far, enjoying their summers. Here in Sacramento, it's been a fairly moderate summer. I just talked to my mom today, and she was telling me down in the desert it's 120 plus. So guess what? I got a phone call for her to come visit me this coming week. So anyway, looking forward to a good rest of the summer and a nice meeting today. I want to let everyone know that we do not have a workshop scheduled, as we normally try to piggyback this meeting with a workshop tied to some regulatory matter that we're under review or discussing internally at the Bureau and working on, but did not have anything that seemed ready for prime time discussion. So we'll look to do that in the October, the fourth and final meeting of the year in October. Let's begin with a round of introductions, starting with Mr. Gregory on my far right. And if you could, not just if there's a few alternates sitting in. We have Bar Advisory Group members with an alternate, and if you're sitting in for the primary member, please just mention who you're sitting in for and what organization.
Good morning. I'm Vince Gregory with AAA Northern California.
Megan McKernan, Auto Club of Southern California.
Dave Robinette with ICAR.
Jack Moladonna on behalf of the California Auto Body Association.
George Ritz with the California Automotive Teachers.
The Automotive Service Councils of California.
Polsky, California Midas Dealers Association.
Reinhardt with the California New Car Dealers Association, sitting in for Brian Moss.
John Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition.
Rick Escalambre, California Automotive Teachers, sitting in for Ruben Parra.
Steve Sharp, California Auto Wholesalers Association, sitting in for Gary Conover.
Thank you very much for doing that for all of our audience. I want to let everyone know that the Bar Advisory Group meeting is, there's Mr. Fowler. Mr. Fowler, please introduce yourself, and you're sitting in for someone. Just mentioned who that is.
Hi, I'm Kyle Fowler. I'm sitting in for Nikki Ayers.
You're with the Independent...
IAPA. Yes.
Yeah, Independent Automotive Professionals Association. Thank you very much. Want to remind everyone that we are webcasting, as we always do, our public meetings and workshops. The address for commenting on any of the matters, if you are not able to physically be in attendance here, you can certainly participate, as some do, through the webcast. And if you have a comment or question about any of the presentations or anything else on the agenda at the appropriate time, please feel free to do so through the webcast. And that address is barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Well, I finally got it right without looking at my notes. Bar meeting, all one word, barmeeting@dca.ca.gov. Let me quickly, before we get into the agenda, introduce my executive leadership team. I saw him just a minute ago. Doug Bellotti, Assistant Chief. Shelley Whitaker, Deputy Chief for all things admin, which would include our personnel office, our business services office, facilities management, contracts, the Consumer Assistance Program. That's the Smog Check Consumer Assistance Program for vehicle retirement and repair assistance services, as well as our licensing operations. And where are you? Clay Lake. Clay Lake oversees the Smog Check operations, the engineering and research branch, as well as the technology services branch, which is the all of our PC support operations, as well as our applications that are developed mostly in support of the Smog Check program. Thank you all for being here. A couple of others, Matt Woodcheck and Zach Richardson, here for support of the meeting. Zach, as you know, is kind of our right-hand person in the executive office. Anything that you have a question about getting on the agenda or issues relative to someone who can't be in attendance at the meeting or needs certain accommodations for the meeting, please contact Zach. Thank you. We'll get started. Mr. Castrillo, welcome. Thank you very much. We have our first update on DCA news and update, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, Mr. Castrillo is Deputy Director with our, I always get this wrong, Chris, and I apologize. Its name has changed, so I'll let you do what the unit is that you oversee.
Officially, for the record, Chris Castrillo, Deputy Director for Board and Bureau Services here at the Department of Consumer Affairs.
Thank you very much.
Always appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to BAR. Just want to give you guys a couple of super brief updates. Should be fairly quick. Couple of top line items. One, I think folks are aware, trying to, in my head, recognize when the last time was that we had spoke to you, but our previous director, Dean Grafilo, has left the department. The governor's office is currently working to identify a successor, and our executive team is looking forward to working with the governor's office to ensure a smooth transition at the top. During the transition, I think things have been going pretty seamlessly. We've got a great team up there in the executive office. So for us, it's just business as usual, and then we look forward to preparing for a smooth transition whenever the next leader of DCA is tapped to come on over. During this transition period, Chief Deputy Director Chris Schultz took over the role for our director's quarterly meetings. These are quarterly meetings that we have that invite bureau chiefs, executive officers to join with the executive office here at the department and kind of go over some issues of key import. We communicated sort of his commitment to perform both roles, and kudos to Chris for wearing both the hats of the chief deputy director and the director at this time. Encourage executive officers and bureau chiefs to continue, again, sort of business as usual as they would work with the executive office here, send ideas on cross-cutting projects and new leadership, and where, as always, we can focus our intention to best suit not just BAR, but all of our programs here at the department. And then lastly, just want to give a quick note on the Future Leadership Development Program. On May 22nd, 2019, this year's cohort of 8 individuals graduated from the department's Future Leadership Development Program. Just want to acknowledge Mr. Matthew Gibson, who is a part of this year's graduating group, and also just want to thank Chief Durace for his commitment to the program. He's been a mentor to our cohort in the Future Leadership Development Program. Certainly those mentors are an absolutely key aspect of the success of this program, so we really appreciate your participation in that, Chief. Thank you. Applications for the third cohort are open, so if there's anyone from BAR or anyone else kind of listening in from our other programs who would like to be a part of now the third Future Leadership Development Program cohort, highly encouraged to apply. Candidates can submit their applications from now through August 2nd, 2019. As I mentioned, BAR has been a great advocate for this program, and we look forward to receiving any applications from yours and any other programs within DCA. And then just before I end, just want to provide a quick note of thanks to all the folks serving on the advisory committee. My team has been working with the governor's office and agency in filling vacancies across our board appointments at all of DCA programs. And I'm reminded as we go through those conversations, we do some of these initial interviews with folks, that it's been really good for me as a reminder that this is a truly volunteer position that folks are stepping into. There's a significant time commitment associated with all of this, but the work that any of our volunteer appointed members from whether it's an advisory committee or any of our other boards or programs under DCA is just absolutely vital. And so I recognize that there are a couple folks here who are standing in for others, but certainly for those of you who have been a part of this advisory committee, we just want to extend a little bit of gratitude for the work that you do, and it's absolutely necessary for the success of this department. So again, just appreciate everything you all do here. And with that, that'll conclude my remarks, unless there's any questions.
Any questions or comments? Okay. Well, we do, actually. Mr. Charlie Peters in the audience, all the way from the Swiss Alps, it appears. I teased him that he was auditioning for The Sound of Music as he was walking in today, so. I think the mic is not picking you up there. There's a button at the bottom. Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. I was busy looking at my socks or something, and I didn't understand. Do we have a new director, or do we have a director, or what's going on in relation to that? I would ask as a question to this gentleman, to you for this gentleman.
Happy to answer that. Yeah, so we currently have a vacancy position at the director level. That being said, one of the things that I mentioned that all the delegated authorities that would go to a director fall to our chief deputy director. So I had mentioned our chief deputy director, Chris Schultz, has been wearing two hats, the director hat and his chief deputy hat, but continues to have all the delegated authorities that a director would.
Okay, having said that, now that I know the color of my socks, I have mentioned that we've had an ongoing conversation with two of the previous directors and with this committee concerning a possibility of two items, one of which is to record the information that would indicate the engine family or something that will relate to the issues of warranty, and doing a smog check to enter that information into the smog check machines for that, so that, first of all, the provider becomes aware that whether or not the car might be under warranty, because right now he's not required to do anything there, so he would not know that, and that could make a significant improvement in performance of the program. And item two is that we have a system that tracks whether or not a car has previously failed in the last 60 days. It notifies the mechanic when he does a smog check that it failed previously. We propose that that should be done after all the entries for that smog check have been provided before the certificate is issued, giving the technician the opportunity to abort the test or repair the car or do whatever they want, and that to be used as a random quality audit. And we think the combination of those two items have a real possibility of doubling the effectiveness of the emissions testing program for the state of California. We have taken that to the two previous directors. So I would ask you, is there someone who can listen to that presentation that we provided twice already, that has been an ongoing request to the governor and the legislature in writing, signature required, clear back to like 93, that whether that we can have that conversation and have an opportunity maybe to significantly improve the performance and improve the outcome of the things that we're addressing here today.
I can jump in here, at least on the first issue. We are working very diligently, actually, with our smog check contractor to look at tying in, and we're looking for a presentation in October. I think something that you'd be very interested in, as well as the rest of the entire advisory group here, on a way to inform motorists on their vehicle inspection report that they get with every passing or failing smog check, information about open recalls, warranty information, and such. That is work that we're currently exploring with, as I say, with our current vendor, and looking forward to have a presentation in October on that issue.
Do you, Mr. Duray, would you object to our continuing request to speak to somebody at director's level?
Not at all. I just wanted to point out that we are looking to provide some very salient information to one of the points that you raised.
We would be extremely delighted and excited if that becomes a possibility, that if you or a member of your staff would attend, that would be great.
Absolutely.
So how do I find out? How am I going to learn whether or not that's a possibility? Are you going to have a way of getting back a hold of me or providing some feedback?
Absolutely. So I'd recommend, how about when we hop off here, I'll give you my contact information, and then we can always serve as a liaison. Myself, Karen Nelson, who you may recognize from previous automotive repair advisory committee meetings. We're more than happy to kind of coordinate with you and loop in with obviously with conversations with BAR.
really appreciate, because we think that this is a very important service to the consumer in California for the motorists. That's who I claim to represent, because we don't think that they're getting the kind of service that they deserve and should get, and we think that that can improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Anything else for Mr. Castrillo? All right, thank you, Chris. I want to thank Chris and the entire DCA executive office team for their support of the Bureau, and obviously this advisory group and their regular attendance here. And also want to thank him for pointing out a program that I'm a really big believer and strong supporter of, is that Future Leadership Development Program. We've had a couple of bar employees who've gone through the first cohorts or groups that have been set up for this program. It's kind of a new approach to succession planning, looking to find our future leaders in state government, particularly the Department of Consumer Affairs and obviously the Bureau of Automotive Repairs. So I've been, as Chris pointed out, a mentor in this most recent cohort, and looking forward to participating again. I also appreciate the fact that he had pointed out one of our own most recent candidate or graduates, Matthew Gibson, an enforcement program manager who isn't here with us today. He's traveling back east with his family on vacation, but just recently graduated from the program. Very, very happy to have seen him gone through that. It's a very rigorous program, and one I think it would serve anyone who gets through it or goes through it well. So I'm encouraging other bar employees to sign up for this program in the next iteration of it, as the department is currently looking for applicants. All right, moving on. Legislation and regulations update. Holly O'Connor. Holly is, I think we pointed out in our last meeting, was promoted to kind of the senior regulations coordinator positions, the position that was previously held by Brian Clark. And we have recently backfilled behind Holly's old position with Lucy Sarkisian. Welcome to you both. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Holly O'Connor, and I'll be providing the legislation and regulations update today. Beginning with legislation, I'll provide a brief overview of pending bills that may be of interest to the industry. And on the regulatory side, I will provide an update on BAR's pending regulatory packages. Before I begin, I want to quickly say that although every effort is made to ensure the information provided on these slides is the most current, given the nature of the legislative process, hearing dates or bill summaries shown here may not reflect the latest updates. For the most current bill information, that can be found at www.leginfo.legislator.ca.gov. So there are 11 bills I will be reviewing, and start with AB 142. This would increase the manufacturer fee on lead acid batteries from $1 to $2. This fee would not apply to a person with regard to a replacement lead acid battery if a new motor vehicle dealer sells or leases a used vehicle which has a replacement lead acid battery. This bill would also establish a lead acid battery recycling facility investigation and cleanup program. This bill is with the Senate Appropriations Committee, and there is no hearing currently scheduled. AB 161 deals with electronic proofs of purchase and would require that a receipt or proof of purchase for goods or services be provided electronically unless a consumer specifically requests that it be in paper form. There is a hearing with the Senate Appropriations Committee scheduled for August 12th. AB 210 would exempt vehicles manufactured prior to 1983 from the smog check program. This bill, though, is designated as a 2-year bill and will be revisited in 2020. AB 390, which deals with citations and fix-it tickets for noise violations, also is designated as a 2-year bill and will be revisited next year. AB 596 updates information that is required to be contained in a notice that new car dealers must provide to consumers, and would also permit a new car dealer to receive electronic authorization from consumers for any repair of a manufacturer recall. This bill is with the Senate Judiciary Committee and has no hearing scheduled. AB 755 increases the California tire fee by $1.50, bringing it to $3.25. However, this bill was ordered to the inactive file at the author's request on May 29th. AB 949 deals with unsafe tires and would prohibit an automotive repair dealer from installing an unsafe used tire on a motor vehicle for use on a highway, and would require the automotive repair dealer to use a visual inspection to determine whether a tire meets the criteria of an unsafe used tire. This bill is with the Senate Business and Professions Committee and has no hearing scheduled. AB 1359 deals with developing and maintaining a registry of towing companies operating in the state, and this is also designated as a 2-year bill and will be visited next year. AB 1538 deals with insurance collision coverage. This bill would allow an automobile physical damage claimant to select the auto body repair shop of their choice, or to receive a monetary payment based on the value of the damage to the vehicle in lieu of having the vehicle repaired. However, an insurer may require that a damaged vehicle be repaired as a condition for payment if the damage to the vehicle is sufficiently serious that safety features of the vehicle's operating system are compromised. This bill, though, would not prevent an insurer from restricting payment in case of suspected fraud. This bill was enrolled on July 9th and is awaiting signature or veto by the governor. SB 59 deals with automated vehicles and would establish state policy relating to automated vehicles to ensure that these vehicles support the state's efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and encourage efficient land use. This bill requires the Office of Planning and Research to convene an automated vehicle interagency working group to guide policy development for automated vehicle technology. This bill is currently with the Assembly Appropriations Committee and does not have a hearing scheduled. SB 460, beginning in 2020, would authorize the DMV to establish a biennial registration period for a vehicle. However, this bill was placed in the Senate suspense file on April 29th. And that's it for legislation. Does anyone have any questions?
Nothing from the advisory group. One from the audience. Mr. Peters again. I'm not sure if the mic is on. You'll have to turn on the button, hit the button on the bottom of the mic. There you go.
Yes, Chairman DeRay and interested parties, I think I saw something in the news indicating that there was a bill that was generating money out of the funds for environment to fix the water in California. And since global warming is a primary issue of the state of California these days, and my state senator was the only dissenting voter on that bill. There was a complete consensus on the Senate side. And supposedly this bill was going to the governor for his signature. I did not hear anything about what that bill was and its status. But I think that very significantly relates to automotive repair, and that is relating to the trading of credits and global warming and so on, which is supposed to be is indicated as a primary function of state government these days.
We'll take a look at it. I wasn't aware of the bill. It wasn't on our radar, but we'll certainly do some research after the meeting and look to give an update at the next meeting.
Sooner would be better. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I will move to our current regulatory packages that we are working on. The first one I'll review is the STAR program cleanup. The STAR program regulation package has 3 purposes, which are to delete outdated Gold Shield program provisions, amend STAR eligibility criteria and revise the STAR suspension process to be consistent with statute. BAR received suggested edits from DCA Legal and resubmitted the revised package on June 12th, so we are just waiting to hear back from them. The next package is the licensing form updates, and the purpose of this is to increase the Bureau's application review time if an application contains discrepancies or if the physical address where business is to be conducted was subject to prior disciplinary action or is subject to a pending administrative action. This package also unincorporates BAR's licensing applications and lists the application components in regulation. This was also submitted to DCA Legal for review on February 15th of this year. The next one is the rehabilitation and substantial relationship criteria for licensure. Pursuant to Assembly Bill 2138 from last year, boards and bureaus are required to establish criteria for determining the rehabilitation of an applicant or licensee when considering the denial, suspension, or petition for reinstatement of a license due to a criminal conviction. AB 2138 also requires us to establish criteria for determining when a crime is substantially related to the qualifications, functions, or duties of a licensee. DCA Legal has completed the informal review for this package, and I will be submitting the package for formal review next week. And once that is completed, we will file with OAL to begin the 45-day public comment period.
Isn't there a implementation timeline spelled out in the bill? Was it July of next year?
It needs to be completed by July 1st of 2020. Yeah. The next one is the training provider requirements, and the purpose of this package is to make requirements for certification of smog check training providers consistent with current licensing requirements. Also to authorize training for compliance with laws and regulations and to make conforming changes to the disciplinary guidelines. This rulemaking package was submitted to DCA, and BAR is currently working on revisions. And due to the amount of time this package is taking to get through, we are pulling out items 2 and 3 to move them along more quickly. And the next step will be to submit this amended package to DCA Legal. And once their review of that package is complete, we will file with OAL. The next one is the brake and lamp stations and adjusters. The purpose of this package is to revise ID numbers for station and adjuster license applications, license renewal and equipment requirements, handbooks providing procedures related to the inspection of brake and lamp systems and issuance of brake and lamp certificates, and to revise the brake and lamp certificate of adjustment and compliance. This package also eliminates the gross vehicle weight rating restriction of vehicles to be inspected and certified by Class C stations. Currently, we are reviewing DCA Legal's recommendations for edits, and again, once we complete that, we will resubmit it to DCA. Our repair assistance package is to increase smog check repair assistance participation by providing higher repair contributions based on vehicle model year, reducing high pre-repair diagnostic fees for low-income vehicle owners, and to remove unnecessary eligibility restrictions pertaining to vehicle registration. This package was submitted to DCA for review on April 17th. Once we receive their edits back, we'll make the appropriate changes and submit for formal review. That is it for the regulatory packages. Does anyone have any questions?
Yes, Mr. Molodonov.
Jack Molodonov, thank you, Holly, for that presentation. I have a question regarding the certified training. Yes, that one. You knew that. You
I
read
knew
my
that.
mind.
She knew that
I
was
was ready.
coming.
Well, you mentioned you're pulling out a couple of items. You said items 2 and 3, and so I wanted to what are items 2 and 3?
To authorize training for compliance with the laws and regulations and to make conforming changes with the disciplinary guidelines.
These are the issues that you are interested in, and and because of the amount of work that is necessary on the first item that this regulatory package was attempting to address, I felt that we had fairly simple regulatory changes that would be beneficial to all, both us, BAR, as the regulator, as well as industry, that I felt it significant enough to, or important enough to address those issues sooner than later and not have those two key items of this package being weighted down by the first, the other change that we're looking to accomplish with this package. So I'm looking to pull those two items out and run them on their own
So
and hopefully speed up the process.
Right. So what's left in the package? There was a section in there dealing with the certification to tie into the disciplinary guidelines. Is that still in there? Do you know?
Oh, it's all in there. I'm going to pull it out of the package and run it as two separate packages, though. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So rather than have one comprehensive package, pull items 2 and 3 out and run them as their own package.
Okay.
And kind of leapfrog item number 1 on this package, on this regulatory package.
Yeah, no, because the workshop, it shows there back in January 2014. I didn't have any gray hair then, but it's been a while.
You didn't have glasses then either.
Yeah. So you think that splitting them up will speed up the process? That's obviously the intent.
Not necessarily for item number 1, but item number 1 is where the bulk of the rework is having to be done. Yeah.
Okay.
Nothing seems to be wrong with items 2 and 3, but they're being held in suspense based on all the changes we're addressing with item number 1.
So 2 and 3 separated. Now, does that mean, is that going to have to go through review again with DCA, that entire process, or they've reviewed 2 and 3 and now we can just move ahead with the Office of Administrative Law, or what's the process in that?
My guess is that they'll want to see it.
They will have to re-review it.
All right.
But it's a fairly straightforward change. Not a lot of text to it, not a lot of justification behind it. For us, we have laws and regs training that we would like to include in some of our disciplinary matters. We actually have court orders from the administrative law judges that order that, and we have nothing to point to. This is kind of a case of if you build it, they will come, I think. If we put something like this in our regulation, we'll actually see training providers put forth programs that would serve the industry well and serve BAR well.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we have a couple questions to the left, Mr. Gallo.
Yes, Johan Gallo, California Automotive Business Coalition. The concern that I want to echo Jack's concerns, and I think I understand the importance of pulling 2 and 3 out to expedite the first part of that. I would just ask that we put a sense of urgency to 2 and 3, and so it doesn't get lost in the shuffle, because I think 2 specifically is critical if we're going to be doing these things and having the training, that we have all of the support so that people understand the rules and regulations on how they need to operate, and then ultimately we can address the disciplinary action aspects of it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that comment.
Rick Escalombre, California Automotive Teachers. Pat, being new to this, can you clarify what number 1 actually means? What that is leading to, that general statement?
To the best of my recollection, since it's been so long, in about 2012, we changed some of our licensing structure. As you may recall, we split the smog check technician license into 2. We now have a smog check inspector license as well as smog check repair technician license. And I think this is making some conforming changes relative to that licensing restructure effort of 7 years ago. It's not critical to the success of our program, but it is looking to kind of catch us up with some of those changes that were made some time ago.
Okay, so no direct impact on technicians or schools?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Anything from the audience or via the webcast? No? Yes, we do. Mr. Peters again.
socks and all. I just was confused by something that was shared, that the legal portion, the judges are having an effect here, when it doesn't seem that whatever they do matters at all. They come up with a decision, it gets overridden by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and they're affecting your behavior. That sounded very interesting. Can you share more about how the regulatory judges are affecting what you're doing, when in fact they seem to be nothing but your children taking care of your business in the general system of things? That seems to be interesting. Thank you.
My mic is off. I'll just quickly elaborate on that, or comment to that, comment on that question. I believe, first of all, we had a presentation, fairly involved discussion. If it wasn't our last meeting, it may have been our January meeting. Two meetings ago? Yeah, explaining the enforcement and enforcement process, and all the way through a decision on a disciplinary matter. Administrative law judges are, and the way it's set up in our statutes, our laws, here are cases, are administrative disciplinary matters, and issue proposed decisions that are reviewed by the Department of Consumer Affairs, and specifically the director has the ability to affirm those decisions, those proposed decisions, or reject them, or potentially modify them, or potentially send them back to the administrative law judge for reconsideration, I guess. Is that the best word? Or to hear some matters again that were not maybe fully addressed. Things that come to mind are cost recovery considerations for BAR's investigation. Those kinds of things get sometimes bounced back for reconsideration. But yes, the way the Administrative Procedure Act is set up allows the department to weigh in or make a final decision on a proposed decision coming or handed down from an administrative law judge. Mr. Anapolsky is very well versed in these affairs and matters, and if there's anything if I've spoken out of line or needs some clarification or elaboration, I'm sure he's would jump in here. Welcome the opportunity to do so.
Yeah, the process is governed by the Administrative Procedure Act, and BAR administrative hearings are subject to the Administrative Procedure Act. At the conclusion of a hearing, an administrative law judge issues what's called a proposed decision. The proposed decision then is not sent to the licensee, it's sent to the agency, board, or bureau. They have 100 days in which to either adopt the decision or reject the decision and do what's called an alternate decision, where they can accept it in part, reject it in part, write their own decision, or if they do nothing, it's adopted by operation of law in that 180-day period. As far as BAR goes, I would be, in all the years that I've been handling BAR cases, I can only think of one instance where there was a proposed decision that I was involved with that was rejected, and I think it could have been on a cost recovery basis, Pat. I think that's, if I remember right. But by the majority of the decisions, not only with the Bureau of Automotive Repair, but many of the boards, bureaus, and agencies are accepted by the agency, who then has to forward the decision to the Department of Consumer Affairs for final approval. That's the process.
Thank you very much, Lou, for that
If I
filling
might,
in the
Mr.
gaps on my attempt.
If I might, Mr.
Yes.
DeRay, I'm aware of a case that I believe where there were two identical circumstances where people knew each other quite well. And one got one answer and the other got the other answer. And the final bottom line was, dependent on how somebody liked somebody or whatever, it just didn't seem to be appropriate. And the administrative law judge dismissed the one case, or said there was no case. It went to DCA and they said, sorry, gotcha. And so But my point was, it appears to me as though the final bottom line here is indicating that they're, in fact, addressing issues that have to do with how you're doing your job. You seem to be in control of the outcome, and the fact that it's being looked at, I think that's healthy and appropriate. But I'm just saying, I've seen some cases where, from perspective that some of the players outside of this room have indicated that things seem to be based on relationships rather than the law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for those comments. All right, anything else on our legislative and regulatory update? All right, in October, I know you know where that next question from Jack's coming.
Yes.
How far along are we on that laws and regs training? So
I
we're
think
going
I'll
to
be
be pushing
happy
that.
in October.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank you both. Welcome, Lucy.
Thank you.
Okay, our next update and some pretty good information that we're looking forward to having an update on from Clay Leak from our Bar Executive Office, California Vehicle Inspection System Transition, otherwise known as CAL-VISTA. Some interesting developments over the last few months on the project, and I notice, as I'm sure others here, notice it's your cohort. You are here alone. You have lost one, and you can explain some of that, and that's some of the developments that I'm referring to over the last few months. Thank you, Clay, and welcome.
Thank you. Again, Clay Leak with the Bar Executive Office, and have some exciting news to share relative to the CAL-VISTA project. First, just a quick review in terms of the scope of the project. First goal was to negotiate the ownership of the system, which was done. Refresh the system to a state-owned data center, which is complete. Publish and award an RFP to obtain ongoing maintenance and operation services, which I'm really happy to report is complete. And finally, the work to transition maintenance and operation services to a new vendor, which is the last kind of chunk of work associated with this project. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those activities and the status of those. Just a quick review of some of the baseline dates that we've been reporting against. The one update is that the RFP has been awarded and the contract has been executed. And I'll get into a little bit of some of the details of that contract and the vendor that that contract was awarded to. It was executed a few days late. I think 6/1 was our target date, so I have it up here in red as being a little bit late, but pretty much on schedule. So just again, quickly in terms of status, kind of an update, what's occurred over the last quarter. We received bids back in February. We've been working diligently to review those bids. In June, May and June, the state invoked Public Contract Code 6611, and we entered into negotiations with all compliant bidders. The result of those negotiations was that the contract was awarded to Encore Consulting, LLC, and that contract award was made public on June 4th. I've actually got Encore's program manager here, Greg Millard. Maybe Greg, if you could stand up. There he is. So maybe Greg will join me one of these days up here in the future for a future presentation, and I'll have another a buddy up here for a future presentation. So in terms of kind of the summary of the new contract and how it impacts the industry, 11/1 of 2019 is the targeted M&O transition date. There's a lot of work for Encore to get done between now and then, so we are tracking that work very closely. It is possible that that date could slip if that work doesn't get done. If it does slip, it will slip in 1-month chunks. We do have an option in the contract with SGS to extend their services 1 month at a time if it's required. So we're optimistic we won't have to execute that, but it's certainly on the table if we need to. The contract duration is 5 years with 5 optional 1-year extensions. The statement of work is very different than the previous contract. There's a lot more flexibility to accommodate program changes. Certainly one of our goals moving forward is to be able to make important program changes quickly, efficiently, without downtime, and accommodate program needs and improvements. Very different SLA structure. The short is even higher penalties for downtime. Obviously, this system being available is really important for the smog check industry, for consumers to get their vehicles registered. It's something we take really seriously. Increased financial penalties for downtime is something that's been incorporated into this contract. And finally, I'm really happy to report we'll be reducing the smog check fee from $1.08 to 70 cents per test. Over 10 years, it's roughly a savings of $46 million. So something I'm really proud of. The team worked really hard to get here. I think there's a lot of folks that deserve credit. I asked Jason Piccioni, who's the DCA CIO, to attend today. He was not, but I certainly wanted to recognize him. Wanted to recognize Pat Duray, our chief, for his leadership. Our partners at SGS Testcom that have helped us manage the program for the last 13 years. A lot of credit to them. So really excited to kind of turn the page and start fresh with a new vendor. There's a lot of program changes. Pat spoke to a few earlier that we're excited to get moving on, and we're finally at a point where we have some capacity and resources to start addressing some of those program changes and enhancements. So that's exciting. I guess the last thing briefly I'll mention, I know a lot of folks weren't thrilled when we raised the cost per test from $1.08 to $1.25. And that was seed money for CAL-VISTA. That's what was required to take ownership of the system, move it to a state-owned data center. But I think that investment was worthwhile. The $46 million savings over the next decade proves that money was well spent. And I really want to make sure all of you, every penny counts. Every penny we collect from the industry, I want to make sure we spend it well and we care and feed the program in a way that works for everybody. So. Again, just really proud of this work and really glad to be past this milestone of getting the contract executed, and looking forward to a really great partnership with a great vendor, Encore Consulting. So in terms of what's next, as I mentioned, there's a lot of work to get transition the maintenance and operation services to the new vendor. We are currently working on transferring ownership of all system components to the state. There's some deferred functionality and a lot of system documentation that we're working really hard to make sure is accurate and complete in order to minimize the risk of this transition. And in terms of the tasks for the new vendor, Encore, a lot of deliverable expectation documents have been submitted. They obviously have to stand up a billing and a help desk system to help support stations enrolling and managing internal incidents, problems, changes. A lot of management plans are required to be delivered and accepted by BAR, so we have comfort and transparency that incidents, problems, changes, capacity are all being managed appropriately. A whole bunch of management tools need to be stood up. And finally, the big one is station participation enrollment. Every smog check station that wants to do smog checks past the M&O service date, which is currently 11/1, is going to have to enroll with the new vendor. They're going to have to enroll with Encore. We are really pushing for these services to be available online, and they will be available online. Stations will be able to go to a portal, sign up, and enroll with Encore. We're really pushing to make this as paperless as possible and get away from check processing and move towards ACH processing for obvious reasons. But I really want to make it clear that if stations do not get enrolled by the M&O service date, they are not going to be able to perform smog check smog check inspections. It's really critical that folks don't push off getting enrolled. It's a process that shouldn't take more than 5 or 10 minutes. So there's no reason to wait till the last minute. And that is all I have.
Any questions for Clay from the advisory group members? Yes, I do. Mr. Kusa, immediately to my right.
Thanks, Clay. The notification process for stations to enroll, what's that going to look like?
Robust. We are there will be ET blasts from BAR. There will be communication directly from Encore. There'll be letters. There'll be phone calls. We are going to bug. Yeah, it's really robust. If folks aren't signed up, they're going to get sick of us calling them, is the goal.
I might recommend sky raiders and carrier pigeons as well.
Smoke signals, whatever it takes. Yeah, whatever it takes.
I had Ms. McKernan first, down to the end.
Yeah, Megan McKernan, Auto Club of Southern California. How soon can they enroll? I guess is my question.
I don't have an exact date. That's part of the deliverables, the transition in deliverables I was talking about. We will certainly communicate as soon as that's available. Greg might have a better update than I can, but that's certainly one of the things we're working towards identifying. We had actually kind of hoped to present a little bit more, but not quite ready to do that yet.
And then the fee reduction, that'll take place after the 11/1?
It will take place on the M&O service date, which right now is targeted for 11/1. Could potentially slip, but yeah.
All right,
Yep.
thank you.
Now, Mr. Molodonov.
Yeah, just two follow-up questions. So on the enrollment, obviously the idea is to be able to enroll before the 11/1 date. And
Yes.
Okay, so they can do it several months before this. Okay. And then the second question was with regard to the reduction in fee, which is great, $1.08 to 70 cents. Is that fixed, or can that be during the process? Can that bump up sort of like what happened with SGS? They went to $1.25. I mean, how does that work?
So that's a great question. This contract is structured quite a bit differently. It certainly could go up. I'm actually optimistic that we will be able to reduce it over time, and that's certainly my goal. I'd be happy to kind of walk you through the differences. The state has a little bit more control over that cost per test, and we have some flexibility with how we reimburse the contractor for special projects and things of that nature. We have the flexibility to use encumbered funds. So we built in a lot more flexibility, and obviously a lot depends on the number of vehicles, right? The number of smog checks. So yeah, there's quite a bit more flexibility, and I'm optimistic that the cost per test over time is something we'll be able to kind of chip away at. Every penny counts.
You had mentioned on a related note, and Jack kind of hit upon it, that the fee actually went up from $1.08. I think you said it went up to $1.25, but I think it actually went up 25 cents to $1.32,
You're correct.
33, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, and that was temporary, and that was part of the negotiation we had with the current vendor, SGS, to take ownership of the system and migrate the database to our Tier 3 data center at the Office of Technology, OTech.
Yep.
Okay, and then that went down back to $1.08
Correct.
in November
Yep.
of last year. Okay.
Yeah, I think that I just kind of the point I wanted to make is, the increasing that cost per test for about 2 years was the revenue that was required to move the system, take ownership, and really create a level playing field, which is ultimately how I think we were able to achieve a cost reduction in the cost per test, by leveling the playing field and really creating a competitive bidding environment. So.
And that we did. Yes, Mr. Ritz. Oh, I thought you, okay. Mr. Gallo.
Just real quickly, question on, are there any foreseen or anticipated problems in the transition to the new vendor?
There's risk with any transition. Obviously, this is the technical transition was probably the most risky transition, which is behind us and was very successful. I think there's risk with an administrative transition like this. We have worked really diligently to identify those risks and work to mitigate them and develop pretty detailed contingency plans. So yes, there's risk, but I think we're doing everything we can to mitigate those risks and ensure a smooth transition. Ultimately, the goal, obviously, just like with the technical transition to the new system, is for this to be totally transparent to industry.
We've already facilitated meetings between the current and the new vendor, Encore, as well as, you want to speak to the rebadge effort too? I think that's very critical to this transition as well.
Sure, and I know SGS isn't with us today, but I certainly want to acknowledge their willingness to work with us and work with the new vendor. They've been very professional and respectful, and I wanted to acknowledge that. They've been great to work with. there's a lot of techniques to mitigate risk with a transition. One is a rebadging effort. Certainly there's key folks, on the SGS side right now that may want an opportunity to work with the new vendor and may want to stay with the program. So we're certainly working to identify those folks and those opportunities and make sure we do everything we can, not only to minimize the risk of this transition, but to take care of the people that have been taking care of us, and make sure they have opportunities to move forward and grow and meet their professional needs. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Other questions, comments? Anyone from the audience? Anyone from the bar webcast? Okay. Thank you very much, Clay.
So lastly, I will mention, with CAL-VISTA coming to an end, we have a whole nother modernization effort coming soon, which we briefly mentioned at a few of the other BAG meetings, the enforcement licensing modernization, or ELM. It's another large reportable project that's going to require a substantial investment in terms of resources and money. But I'm really optimistic. I think there's a lot of opportunities to create efficiencies, to make services available online for our licensees and consumers. But it's very similar. It's going to require a lot of effort and a lot of resources up front, but I think there's a lot of fruit at the end of the road of the enforcement licensing modernization effort as well, and kind of look forward to start working with this group on ways we can improve and make that project better as well.
Thank you. All right, moving along, we have an OBD pre-inspection activity presentation from Alan Lyons and Greg Coburn. Is Alan here? I didn't see Alan. No, I do not. I still don't see Alan. It's Greg Coburn and Garrett Torgerson from the bar engineering and research branch. I assume Mr. Lyons was unable to join us today.
Yeah, good start. Yes, Alan Lyons could not attend today. He wished he could come make this presentation himself, but he asked me to sit in and go through it as well. And I got Garrett Torgerson here as well. Turn that one on. There we go. Now I'm on.
This is a presentation. He can't participate. Yeah, I understand that he was able to give this presentation, which you were attended and at a Smog Check Administrators Forum earlier this year. So that was the impetus behind getting it before our advisory group today.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I'm Greg Coburn, so I manage the program evaluation unit within the bar engineering department.
I'm just here for looks.
You guys already know Garrett. So let's get going on this. So this is really looking at pre-inspection activity, meaning what happens before a smog check inspection, what happens after a smog check inspection, and can you estimate what that benefit is? So you guys may or may not be aware, a lot of states within the U.S. are shutting down their I&M programs, and they're having more and more exemptions put in place. So there's a lot of discussion amongst other I&M programs. What is the benefit? How do we talk to the legislator? How do we explain to them all the full benefits? The failure rate doesn't do full justice to what the program actually does and incentivizes consumers to do. So this analysis takes a shot at a couple of methodologies to get at that. So what are we trying to answer? So Alan's questions were, as he's trying to go through this, is what is pre-inspection activity? What does that consist of? Can it be quantified? How does it relate to the benefits of the I&M program? So pre-inspection activity, what is it? So again, the smog check failure rate doesn't tell the whole story of the benefits of an I&M program, which historically is what everybody bases it on. So the other things that have kind of changed as we've moved from an emissions inspection program where you went in for a bar 97 test or a bar 90 test, you went in for a simple emissions inspection. Consumers didn't know whether they were going to pass or fail the smog check, right? They went in not knowing what the state of the emissions of their vehicle are. Now with OBD, it's changed. You have a check engine light on. You know whether you're going to fail smog check or not based on whether that light is on beforehand or not. So that really does change kind of what that failure rate looks like and what it looks like when that vehicle comes in the lane. They may have chosen to got it repaired. They may have chosen to take some other action. But there's many things that could be causing it. So that means that there's more pre-inspection or pre-repair activity that is happening, because the consumer doesn't want to go into a smog check, pay for it, and then find out they're going to fail, but they already knew going into the smog check that light means failure. There are exceptions to this, as Alan's pointing out in the presentation. People new to the program, new to California, don't understand what smog check is, don't understand what the light is. I think that's not the majority of the population these days. People that need to have the failures documented, they want to participate in BAR's repair assistance program or some sort of scrappage program, they may go in with the light on to get it checked, obviously. So mill on means there needs to be something done in order to pass my smog check. You need to either repair the vehicle, clear the codes, hope to get through the inspection rules, or cheat the program. Can pre-inspection activity be quantified? Yes, it can be, at least it can be estimated. And there's two basic methods that we're going to look at today. So one is using BAR's random roadside inspections. We're the only state that does that, by the way. And the other way that we've kind of presented more for other states to understand how they could go through and get the same estimate is using the OBD data itself. And this is just kind of an initial look into this analysis. So BAR is planning to continue this analysis, but we wanted to give you guys kind of a big overview of what had been presented. So roadside testing. As most of you know, BAR randomly pulls over vehicles and asks them for a voluntary inspection on the side of the road. We test, as you guys can kind of see from this chart here, that's the model year distribution. And this is over numerous years of roadside data. So we do about 10,000 inspections per year on roadsides, usually a little bit more. And so this is a conglomeration of multiple years of data that are used in this analysis. We just recently, over the last year, have really included a lot of the newer model year groups in roadside testings. In the past, we always focused on the older ASM for the historical and the reporting stuff that we'll be going over in the next presentation. But this does include some of the newer model years, which shows some interesting pieces. So this is the smog check data, time aligned with the roadside records that are used in this analysis. So the real point of this slide is to show you've got kind of the green bar are the roadside inspections and the yellow bar are the smog check inspections to show how similar they are. So the first graph there is the model year distribution of the two data sets. And again, you can see they align very well. And the next chart over is the odometer, which is obviously a major indicator of smog check failure. And again, you just kind of see they're very similar in stats there. And the whole point is just to give you guys an idea of the data that was used and that it's not that dissimilar data, it's fairly similar data that's going to be used in this presentation. Yep.
The chart seems to have dropped off. The green is roadside, I see that. And the yellow is the smog check inspections at the station?
Yes, so that is the smog check, inspection at the station.
It looks like it dropped off on yours.
It didn't drop off. That's just the way the presentation was put together. We did not modify it from the CARB version.
Oh, okay.
So you have to just know it. All right, so digging into the analysis, what does it look like on roadsides? So this is showing the mill-on rates on the first graph here. And I really do want to pause, so I want to go slow on this and let you guys digest what is here. So the green line, again, is roadsides, which it'll be consistent throughout this presentation. The yellow line is smog check, again, Pat, not marked. So the difference, if you look at the model year distribution, starting with 1996, you've got a failure rate of, looks like nearly 28% on roadsides when they're pulled over. By the time that you look at those same grouping of vehicles at their smog check inspection, we're down around 5%. That is a large difference in failure rates. Again, leading to the idea something is happening to these vehicles. Are they getting pre-inspected? What is going on? But there's a big difference when we randomly look at vehicles versus when they're actually tested in a smog check lane. The other important piece I'll get to, Gary, I know what you're going to say. So the other important piece to look at here is kind of this trend line goes down. And in the newer model years, it goes down to about 2014 model year. When you look at that, that is the 4-year-old model year. That's when vehicles are kind of coming out of their OEM warranty. And you begin to see the failure rates climb there. It's an important point that that is kind of where vehicles need to start getting repaired and things start going on. Did I capture it? Okay.
Well, and also,
How far out?
It's about the 4 model.
Okay.
Yes, but the bag members can't see it.
so yeah, he's just, if you look at this thing, some of these, it's important to note that some new vehicles, even though they seem like they're relatively new vehicles, some of these vehicles were put on miles at a rate of like 50,000 miles per year. So some of the newer vehicles, even though they're new, they actually tend to be higher mileage vehicles pretty quickly. But what we're seeing here is that really there's not a whole lot of malfunction going on as seen at the roadside, because what the difference between roadside and normal inspections is roadside, they don't know what's coming. There's no ability to tell I'm going to be pulled over. You're just randomly pulled over, so you cannot prepare for it. Whereas smog check, they can prepare for it. And even when we see at the roadside, they're not preparing for it, and still the failure rate is extremely low until they get out of that warranty phase. And then all of a sudden it starts slowly climbing up at that point.
So the next chart over, again, please keep looking at that other one, but the next chart over is basically comparing those two lines. So it's how much higher. And basically what it's showing is that across all the model years, when you actually look at the percent difference, it's about, you get a 6 times higher failure rate at roadsides than you do at smog check. So that's a big difference for, like you guys saw in the very first graphs, these are very, very similar vehicles. We aren't talking about different operating conditions. We're talking about similar times, similar everything. It's 6 times higher if you randomly pull that car over than when you see it in a smog check lane. All right, I'm going to move on to the next chart, but keep all that in mind as we go through this. So this next chart is very similar to the first set of charts, but instead of looking at the mil-on rate, these are mil-off rates, but readiness not set. And this has always been fascinating to us to look at. You know, people always have problems with readiness at smog check, but when you look at it on roadsides, there's really not an issue with it. It's always been an interesting conundrum. Is it, you know, guys resetting codes after doing repairs, or is this consumers messing with their vehicles? What is causing this conundrum? So this has a slightly higher times rate. It's, if you look at the second graph first, it's about 2 times the rate of not ready. But again, quite a bit smaller. So you go back to the first one, not ready rates at roadsides, starting kind of at the 1996 model year, are around 8%. It climbs obviously because of the readiness monitors and how they worked and how they rolled out a little bit for a couple of model years, but around 2000, 2001, it kind of spikes up there about 9.5%. All right. So you can see this one is the exact opposite of the mil-on. So again, roadsides on the bottom this time. So the not ready rate is very low at roadsides. It's down around 5%. So you've got a rate about twice as high when you get in the station. Okay. And again, this kind of has the same drop-off effect. Codes were cleared. Right, and we don't know if that's because inspectors look at this and they say, you know, it's easier to set the readiness monitors after I've done a repair to clear that code out by resetting it and then driving through those drive cycles, or if the consumer themselves are clearing these codes to get through smog check. So again, trying to figure out how much of this is pre-repair versus how much of this is trying to cheat the program. All right, so that's kind of the background. So now, what does this really look like in the roadside data? So this graph is showing, to start with on the left, it's the mil-on rate. So this is mil-on rate. The bottom axis is the time. I guess I should show it. I'll point to it. So this is the number of days, and I'll point to it for the bag members here in a second on the other screen. So this is the number of days since roadside inspection. So right in the middle here is at the exact same time of that roadside inspection, what happened? All right. It doesn't show on the TV screen. Sorry, guys. It won't shine up there. So you guys can tell though, on that bottom axis on that graph, it's got all those numbers. So 365 is basically year into your year. Right in the middle is day zero, okay? So it says roadside mil-on rates fall dramatically when tested shortly before smog check, all right? So when you don't have that many data points, obviously, right at roadsides when you got right at the smog check, but you have a few. Something else really important as we're looking at this graph is that scale on the bottom is not linear, meaning it would be stretched out way longer than that. So it's compressed in and everything's in little bins. So what's in that red box you guys are looking at is 45 days on each side, but that is really elongated and everything else is shrunk in. So the benefits are way out there, okay? So just kind of keep that in mind as you're looking at it. It would look different if you had a giant screen. You could look at the whole thing on actually all the day basis, but we zoomed it in so you can kind of focus in on those days right around inspection. And again, the point is that about 45 days before that smog is due, you see the roadside rates, the mil-on rates start to drop. People are starting to fix their cars right before that smog check is due. And it drops significantly. I mean, we're talking, you're going from, a little below 25% down to below 10%. At the time that smog is due. And then you see it begins to creep up after that. So that smog check event is having a huge effect on the condition of that vehicle and forcing repairs to be done on that vehicle. So the benefits we're calculating are based on the bottom of that graph. We aren't including all those pre-repairs that brought it down to that point. I'm probably not saying enough on this. So when you're looking at before smog check, you see the rates are climbing beforehand also. So if you look at the far left-hand side of that graph, it's starting around that 15%. It's picking up, and it's peaking around 45, and then people are saying, all right, I got this smog check event. The check engine light's been on a while. I'm going to have to go do something about this.
Any conclusion on why it starts to rise again after?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the vehicle's beginning to break again afterwards,
So
right?
they're not getting properly repaired, we suspect.
They're not getting properly repaired and new components failing. Any one of those, yes. And again, it's not totally linear. So you'll see that you probably have longer lasting effects, but because this is all compressed in, yeah.
Well, and there's also an element of code clearing going on too. So that's specifically, I mean, we just implemented permanent DTCs, permanent diagnostic trouble codes, and this data was collected prior to that. And so that's one of the issues that's being addressed by the implementation of the
Significant number of these are probably EVAP, yeah. Yeah.
So they get the DMV renewal notice about 60, 90 days out, and then they start thinking about it. It looks like 45 days in, it starts, okay.
Yep, doing something about it. So the next graph over is the same idea, but this is the not ready rates. So you get the exact opposite trend, right? So the not ready rates are low for the fleet, around 3%. And what do you know, 45 days before the smog check, those begin to go up when you look at them on roadsides. So it peaks around the 10% rate, which is what we see in the smog check, which looks terrible. But that is an indicator that there are events happening. There's repairs, there's people trying to get through the system. Everybody's scrambling to try to figure out how to get through it. So again, there's things happening. Smog check is forcing a number of actions to clean up those cars and clean the air that we aren't accounting for in the emission reductions of the program.
Yeah, and the not ready rate being up does not necessarily indicate that is all code clearing for the purpose of trying to just slip through the program. A lot of that happens just as a result of natural repairs that are actually proper. So,
yes.
A lot of it too is just ignorance on the consumer's part, right? They figure they got the light shut off, so it's going to pass, right? So they show up. No, it's not. You're not ready. So they don't know.
Yep. All right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. It'll summarize some of this. So the bottom line, real in-use mil-on rates are much higher than the rates recorded at inspection, about 6 times higher. Not ready rates are higher at the time of inspection compared to real in-use or roadsides, about 2 times higher. People generally wait until shortly before needing an inspection to deal with mil-on conditions. You know, and the big question here is, if there was no smog check program, would people deal with the light?
That's what black tape.
All right, so that's method one, where California kind of has the luxury of this roadside inspection to really show those details that were presented to the other states. So the next analysis that I'll walk through here, and I'm probably going to abbreviate some of this as it doesn't quite apply as much to California, is estimated using the OBD data itself. And I want to go over some of it just to give you guys an idea of some of the power of the more recent OBD data with the OIS rollout that we can begin to start using to analyze the program and claim benefits for it. So it's not just checking the mill status with the OIS. We're grabbing a lot of great data that's giving us insights into the program. All right, so assumptions. Code clearing is not a very common event outside of I&M. The types of things that would be considered normal reasons for readiness to set. We were looking at that 2%, 2 to 3% type of rate. So the battery's dead in the car, right? It's going to clear the codes if the thing goes dead. Normal repair work happening to a vehicle. There's kind of some base level of normal activity that's happening. And let's see, code clearing is not a very common event outside I&M. It's set for battery discharging and repair work, including code clear, not influenced by smog check, registration renewal. So those are kind of the two pieces that are outside of the normal, that would cause the normal code clearing that you guys are seeing at the roadside rates far away from the smog check event. Therefore, most code clearing within 2 weeks of inspection can be attributed to pre-inspection repair activity. Pre-inspection repair activity indicates the vehicle was in failing condition. For example, the mill is on. All right, so this is kind of the more in-depth analysis, and I won't read through all of this. But basically, there are some assumptions being put in place to look at code clearing within 2 weeks of the inspection. And then using some of the interesting data, we now have on 2005 and newer model year vehicles within the OBD2 system itself, it reports the miles you've driven since code cleared, and it tells you the number of warm-ups since code clear. As you guys know, for permanent DTCs, we're using some of that similar data. So when you're looking at that, Alan was making some assumptions about less than 420 miles and 28 warm-ups. So using kind of some of those assumptions, there's some basic guesses you can make with how much you can attribute to the pre-inspection. So like 20% is kind of the initial guess as to what's going on. 20% of the activity that you're seeing where the codes are being cleared could be the normal stuff, like the batteries, the normal things that are going on. But there's kind of a guess that about 80% of it's attributed to the pre-inspection repairs that's due to smog check of the information that you're seeing. When you play that out against the roadside smog check data, again, to kind of give other states an idea of what this is. So if you do this analysis, you're around 80. If you do the smog check roadside data, you get about 75%. And again, that's kind of using similar methodology to get at this. So you get about 25% that are doing the normal dead battery type activity, and 75% are more the smog check pre-inspection repairs that are going on. Okay, I know it's a little bit confusing. So basically what it means, the last bullet on this slide is the key to this, is that the total end-use failure rate should really be the I&M failure rate plus this pre-inspection activity failure rate. That's what we should be calculating. That's what we should be claiming the real benefit to the smog check program is. Okay, so here's the results kind of what we just went over. So using that methodology, what does that look like in a chart? So this is comparing the roadside end-use failure rate to this estimated OBD smog check failure rate. So again, you can kind of see this difference in it. And again, kind of the I&M programs can make some accommodations for using that OBD data to get back to kind of the more real-world California roadside failure rate and methodology. I know that all is a little more confusing than the prior roadside stuff, but again, it's just another way to do what we went over originally. All right, so the main conclusions of this whole analysis. Most people deal with mill-on conditions before the vehicle is actually inspected and generally wait until they have to. Therefore, inspection failure statistics only reflect a small fraction of the real benefits of the program. The total benefit should be based on the number of motorists that address vehicle problems because an inspection is required. States without a roadside testing program can create a reasonable estimate of pre-inspection activity with just OBD data. Strong I&M programs are still really important. In-use mill-on rates are too high. The most common in-use faults continue to relate to major monitors. And again, I mean, these also become important as other states and California are still grappling with model year exemptions coming out of the program and other program pieces that are looked at. So we're beginning to look at those, and BAR is planning to continue this type of analysis and hopefully present more back to this body.
Thank you, Greg. Remind us again what the current model year exemption is on the newer end.
The newer end, we have an 8 model year exemption.
That started on January 1.
January 1 of this year.
Okay. You very much. Very interesting presentation. I'm sorry Alan couldn't join us, but you've done a great job filling in for him this morning, and you were on the agenda as well. I suspect that you were going to contribute in some way, but you took over the whole thing, and thank you, Garrett, as well. Any comments, questions? Yes, Mr. Kusa.
So fascinating information, and just goes to support the fact that industry was highly opposed to 7, 8-year model year exemptions, and this goes to support that objection. So, and I think maybe that's the direction ARB is going, right? To maybe reverse that. Is that if that's a possibility, they can do that? And you know, I hesitate to say this, but this also is supporting over-the-air OBD3 constant monitoring too, right? So I don't know if that's a direction anybody's considering.
So this analysis was obviously done by Alan Lyons at ARB. I don't know that necessarily indicates what ARB's direction is with respect to this, but I think it's fair to say that this analysis kind of rooted from taking a look at what was the process that we went through to figure out, not us, but the body went through to figure out, do we want to go through 7 and 8 year exemption? Anytime they're exempting vehicles, if it's done properly, we're going to be looking at the trade-offs. What are you giving up to versus what you're gaining by taking that resources you would have spent on the testing those vehicles and invested it elsewhere? And this analysis is just kind of saying, hey, are we properly identifying the true value of the smog check program, the prophylactic effects specifically of the smog check program, to determine if that's really been accounted for when we make these types of decisions, we in a collective?
Yeah, CARB did not take any direct action. It's just kind of, here's the data, here's what it is, let's take a look at it and begin discussing it. So there was no action in either one of the items yet.
Yes.
Okay.
I guess the question is to if that was a desire of the administration or the legislature. Is that an act of the legislature that has to be done, or is there some authority in the law to unwind that based on the deleterious effects of that law potentially? Is that something that can be done regulatorily speaking? I don't know, or does that have to go back to the legislature is what I'm asking.
There are some nuances to that bill, yes. But
Okay.
I mean, I think nobody's making an action on that at this point.
Sure. Okay. Other questions or comments from the advisory group? Seeing none, I'll reach out to the audience. Mr. Rice.
Hi, good morning. Bud Rice with Quality Tune-Up Shops. 2 quick comments. First one is a follow-up to Dave's comment. We fought hard on not letting those years get out of the smog check program, and others thought that it was a good idea to go ahead and let them go. But our feeling was that cars would be out of warranty by the time they got their first smog check, and now those people are on the hook. So So two things. I think when you're saying that there's an opportunity cost, and if you're going to modify the program, what's going to be the offset? The offset is those people paid for a smog check they didn't get because they're still being billed, right? So they're paying for a smog check they don't get. We don't get the reduction in emissions. They don't get the protection of a warranty service. I mean, to me, it's a lose, lose, lose all the way around the horn here. Second comment I wanted to make is that it's easy to look at these, and I don't think you're making this nexus, but it's easy to look at those charts and go, well, I don't know that the smog check program's doing its job as well as it could. The problem is people do what people do, right? And in customers' cases, they'll put off doing work and doing stuff until the last possible moment, and we're forced with trying to deal with that situation. And the truth of the matter is, if you had your roadside checks, and if through some magic way you could tie a ribbon around those cars that you guys checked at roadside, wait a little while, and bring those same cars in and do a roadside check again, you'd find more cars that failed again, and that doesn't mean that roadside was bad. Same thing is true here with the shops. So I just didn't want you to go away thinking that shops are bad, because they're not.
Thank you, Bud. Charlie Peters.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. DeRay and interested parties. Charlie Peters, Clean Air Performance Professionals representing motorists in California, Coalition of Motorists. One of the things here that seems to be of interest, coming up to me as a point of interest, is that we seem to have a lot of discussion about how Volkswagen, with their diesel engines, have cheated the program, and how thousands of people are dying because of this, and billions of dollars are being collected because of this. We're in the process of installing electric charging stations at my bank, at interesting providers of service, cities and counties, and every place imaginable. San Francisco's now putting in charging stations everywhere. So does any of this matter at all, or are we just going to all electric vehicles that are owned by the manufacturer? Or so why is any of this even important? Why are we checking anything? So where is the data of all these failing Volkswagens that have been found with roadside or remote sensing or smog check program? And the answer is you have none. But we're making billions of dollars of impact on the motorists and the air and people's lives, people dying, and there's no data at all.
What do you mean there's no data? What do you
Show me the data, the failing cars of the Volkswagen.
The Volkswagens have been largely pulled out of the fleet. They've been bought back.
Well, there must be some basis of some of those cars must have been failing because they were producing up to 40 times the amount of NOx. I've not seen one instance of data whatsoever. I've seen the contractors put up information in the media talking about these cars would all been caught by our remote sensors, and the answer is no, they wouldn't. None of them have been caught ever. So there's no data to justify this. Going back to the 1992 situation where I personally talked to the number one guy at Fed EPA in Washington, D.C. He says, Charlie, what do you think about my IM-240? I said, well, I'd like to talk about your federal test procedure. And I explained to him how he could get his car tested on a federal test procedure, failing for NOx by 25%, and how I would cheat that car through the program without fixing it at all, causing a detriment to the car rather than fixing it. The guy down the street would give him an estimate that was appropriate and adequate, and he'd end up putting that guy out of business because he'd complain to the Bureau of Automotive Repair because the toilet paper in the bathroom was the wrong color or whatever. I would be at the top of the list as the most effective, most cost-effective, the biggest reductions for the least amount of cost, so all the business would get sent to me. We then had a meeting in '93 at the Ontario Bureau of Automotive Repair office, and there was an agreement to start a pilot demonstration of improved management that dealt with people to improve the program's performance. And that was to start within 45 days. We don't know if the 45 days is up yet, but it ought to be pretty soon. That was in 92. So the people here, if we don't incorporate people, the regulatory agencies, the manufacturers, the equipment people, and the public in the process to seeing that this system functions better, this is all a joke, and it needs to stop now. Because it's doing nothing but taking public money and flushing it down the toilet for somebody's benefit other than the motorist. And it needs to stop. We need to start working on fixing this and seeing that the cars that are broken are identified, what's physically wrong with them gets repaired, and no extras without permission of the customer. Otherwise, what we're doing here is not appropriate. It needs to go to the governor, and the governor needs to stop this now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Anything else on this topic? Anything on the webcast? Okay. Got a thumbs down there. All right. Gary, I guess, are you staying up too? Yeah, I guess, why not? Yeah. Thank you very much for that presentation. You are on the hook again, Mr. Coburn, for our annual smog check performance report presentation. And Frank DiGenova from BAR's engineering branch is also joining us. Obviously, well, to me, but not to the rest of the group here. Mr. DiGenova, very instrumental, very involved in the report writing. Thank you very much, and the analysis that went into it. Thank you. All right, take it away.
All right. So this is just a quick high-level overview we give you guys once a year. We've got 2 major reports that go out, so we just like to kind of go over some of the basic findings from them. First report being the smog check performance report, which is mandated in Health and Safety Code 44024.5B. So that was AB 2289 that enacted that, and basically has us redoing and adding additional pieces onto the original Sierra research report that came out with the refail rate, as many of you will remember many years ago. The main point of this report is looking at the roadside failure rates, and luckily we've gone over a lot of that on the last presentation. And another piece included in this mandate is we have an independent review of the last year's report. This year it was St. Malo Solutions, so I want to thank Mark Carlock, who did the review this year for the first time. And all of those comments and things can be seen in this year's report, which is available on BAR's website. If you just go under if you guys haven't been out, we do have the website's all been updated. It's under basically a reports tab, and you go all the way down the bottom and you'll see the report there. The second report, which I won't spend much time on as we go through this presentation, but we also do an annual US EPA report that's required by the Federal Register, Rule 51.366. This is a really long report if you guys have never looked at it. It's a lot of numbers about failure rates, number of retests, number of vehicles that get different activities done to it in many different ways. And so this is a way that the US EPA can look for our compliance in our program, but also compare against all of the other states. They recently underwent a big audit on all those reports and presented kind of the findings of that to us. And there were no real changes. They liked what was being reported and thought the programs were doing okay. CARB submits this report as part of our SIP requirements to the US EPA on July 31st of each year, and we are on schedule, ahead of schedule, to get that sent out this year as well. We also include the smog check performance report as an additional piece to US EPA, just to give them more insight into our program than just the reporting requirements that are required. So I'm going to go through a couple of the charts that are basically inside the report that you guys can go read for yourself. I highly recommend the read. It's a fairly condensed read this year, which I think is really good. And it goes over a few new topics, which you guys will find interesting. So this is the OAS failure rates by vehicle age comparison. So you've got the black line on the bottom are the OIS initial smog check failure rates for this year. The red line are the OIS roadside failure rates. And the gray line, or the top line, are the Sierra Research failure rates from the original report that you can kind of use to compare. And you can see if you look at it on by an age basis, the red line, which is your normal failure rates, are fairly similar. What you do see, though, when you kind of compare that up to the Sierra numbers, you're seeing some slight difference in there, and we think some of the newer model years don't quite line up as well. Maybe the vehicles are lasting a little better than they were back in 2003 on the same age basis. So that could be some of the reason why they're starting to diverge a little bit there towards the left of the graph. So on the bottom, that 0 through 25 it's the vehicle age. It's not showing very well up on the screen up here, but I think it's okay on the handouts. And again, you're just kind of comparing, like we did in the last one, to what's happening in the smog check station on that bottom line. So a next kind of section of interest in the report that was new to the report this year is we're looking at, in this chart, what we call these fraud indicators in the smog check program. So using the OBD data, there's a number of indicators in there that tell us whether or not we're talking to the right car, the wrong car, a simulator, all types of different information. So this is basically a backwards chart where we looked at since it has March of 2018, but we also saw it before that. The number of fraud indicators during that particular day, how many happened. So you guys can kind of see, starting at the left side of the chart, they're up around 500-600 of these indicators per day were happening inside the smog check program. So then you see we kind of hit this red line in the middle of the graph on April 4th. So April 4th was a big day that you guys have heard a presentation on, where BAR's enforcement department did a really unique thing. They took some action and went out to stations that looked like they may have been using certain types of equipment. So that red day, the number of fraudulent indicators dropped significantly, and by the day after, you were down around 100 versus the 500 to 600 you were seeing before that day. And that trend continued for a number of days. And BAR has continued to kind of look at this trend and watching it for new things, and BAR's enforcement has continued to make different efforts to keep that rate very low and as close to zero as we can possibly get it. So that event basically reduced the number of indicators by 85%. So the report goes over a little bit more of that and gives more of a write-up on what that is and what types of things we're looking at and how we need to continue that at BAR.
I think that operation was called Operation Doorstop, and it was the visit by the field office team of approximately 200 stations in one day.
Yes. Thank you, Pat. So a little bit more on that. There's 2 slides for this particular chart. So it's basically a map of California. So we'll start with Northern California. But in particular, I want you to look at this big graph that is embedded within this. So again, we're showing the relative fraud rate in Southern and Central Valley in this first chart. So this is the relative fraud rate. And you see kind of the red part of that chart. That is before referee direction. And the green part is after referee direction. And I think we've talked about that in this meeting as well, that, BAR, if they see certain indicators now, also directs vehicles to the referee. They don't allow that station to issue a certificate if there are some indicators that indicate that the station may not be plugged into the right car or some other activity going on there. So when we see that, we send them to the referee. So this is again showing that relative fraud rate drops significantly. You kind of see the green line comes way down. And that's historically. So we got 2015 to 2019 here in the chart. So what you're going to see then inside of the map is that same red and green is that chart in each area of the state. Okay, so the key here is that in Sacramento, you see that before and after, the rate's about the same. In Hercules, same thing. You're seeing a little bit of noise, but in general, it's pretty low. South San Francisco, you see a little bit more red, and then it drops off in the green area. All right, so kind of take that into consideration, and then let's look at down south. So down south, to give you guys an idea, this is showing when you're looking at kind of in the far left part of the map, which is a zoom in of Southern California, South El Monte, you have extreme red. And again, coming down in the green once we turn the referee cert blocking on. Culver City, much higher swings than we were seeing up north. This is not an indicator, I want to be clear, this is not an indicator of how the field office is doing. It's literally the number of vehicles that we're seeing this done on in those areas. BAR's enforcement has made huge efforts in trying to take all of those numbers down through multiple methods and trying to make the smog check program equitable to everyone. Oh, and then I wanted to add one more comment to this. So there's referee direction. There's been more than 14,000 vehicles at the time of the writing of the report that were redirected to the referee. Approximately 50% of those 14,000 vehicles ever scheduled an appointment at the referee. So they're finding either some other way or something else to do with their vehicle at that point.
Well, and a lot of those vehicles are just, I mean, they're being cheated on because they can't pass an inspection. So when they, all of a sudden you have to get they're not worth repairing. Our enforcements, they do lot inspections at times, and I know they've come up on vehicles, found that it was improperly certified, and they, when they told the used car lot, basically this vehicle has to go to the referee, the lot just basically said, okay, we're just going to retire the vehicle. It's not worth, so that kind of thing is going on all the time.
It looks like San Jose still has a problem.
San Jose is the one Northern California holdout that has the most improper behavior going on. That's true.
And it looks like it hasn't slowed down afterward.
So the magnitude of San Jose is not as big as what we're talking in the, some of the southern areas. It's as Greg mentioned, it's funny, there's like a behavioral norm difference in certain areas. And it's really what the field offices are having to fight against. I mean, there's behavioral norms down in Southern Cal where if you look at kind of on a map where all these stations are that we know to be kind of perpetrating this sort of behavior, they're all in big clusters together. And it's kind of hard to get in and crack a lot of that because a lot of them are related and, so it's whack-a-mole. You shut one down, another one pops up, and it's this sort of just behavioral system down there.
And San Jose has made efforts. I mean, obviously, this is as of the time of the report when we ran it. It's really for last calendar year. So this is 2018 data you guys are looking at. So I know that they have made efforts in San Jose, and they're continuing to make efforts there to really combat that fraud. But yeah, good point. There is kind of that green spike over there.
And so it's important to note, too, that we can't see everything that's going on. And these guys are constantly innovating, trying to find new ways. And that's why we're heading down the road of producing a requirement or a new specification for the DAD, is because we're having to just innovate all the time to try to stay ahead of them. There's so much money in the improper inspections down there that it encourages people to break the law, to do all sorts of things they wouldn't normally do. And so, our biggest focus right now is trying to interrupt that flow of money. And that's why certificate blocking and that sort of thing has been so effective, because it just stops the flow of money for illicit behavior.
May I just interject one additional point? The two graphs that Greg has shown are really separate fraud indicators. It's possible that some vehicle might appear in one of them and also the other one, but they're actually different indicators, and for the most part, I think we're talking about different vehicles. And there are other indicators that are used as well, not shown here.
All right, so there are a number of factors that affect the roadside fail rates. So four of the major that are identified in the report are the age, the follow-up pass rate, the time since smog check, and the smog check result itself, pass or fail. So these, sorry, I think I skipped one ahead. So there are a couple of graphs I'm going to go over real quick, just kind of showing again, or explained quite a bit more in the report than I'll do here. But this is the probability of roadside ASM failure versus vehicle age. This is for model years 76 to 99. The top red line are the vehicles that prior failed their smog check, and the lower line, the blue line, are vehicles that prior passed their smog check. The dotted lines are basically the air bars around that. So this is just, again, showing the vehicle age effect on the roadside failure probability, and showing that, the newer the vehicle is, obviously the lower probability of the roadside failure rate. Older the vehicle is, the higher that probability. So just showing the degree of that effect of that. As the vehicle ages, it's obviously going to have a bigger effect on that roadside fail rate. All right, another factor is the station follow-up pass rate. So we've all talked about this. This is similar to your star rating. So again, the same thing applies. So the red line is your prior fail. The blue line is the prior pass. This one is showing model years 76 to 2006. So there's a few more vehicles in this chart versus the last one. And this is station FPR we're looking at here on the bottom. So again, the higher performing the station is on the follow-up pass rate metric, the lower that failure rate is going to be at roadsides. All right, so it's just showing that effect. What factors are moving that roadside failure rate? How does it get influenced? Well, what station tested it and how well performing that station is definitely moves the line on how that car is going to perform at roadsides down the line. All right, so you guys can read a lot more about that in the report itself. So I want to go over the key findings, though, that we found inside the report. And I'll just go ahead and read through these. There are 5 points. Analysis of the 2017-2018 roadside testing data, smog check inspection data, and related information presented, discussed and/or cited in this report, leads BAR to conclude the following. Model year 2000 to 2006 OIS tested vehicles tend to fail for OBD in the 2017-2018 roadside sample at a similar but slightly lower rate than the vehicles receiving an EIS or BAR 97 tailpipe inspection at the same vehicle age in the 2003 to 2006 roadside sample. And that kind of goes back to that first graph that we looked at with the Sierra research information on it. A coordinated surveillance enforcement intervention, real-time certificate blocking with referee direction, and new software tools to detect fraud have had success in reducing fraud in the smog check program. Continued efforts will be required to maintain the benefits and maximize the effectiveness of the smog check program. In roadside testing of model year 2000 and newer vehicles previously certified at STAR stations, each FPR drop of 0.4 points. Oh, thanks, Garrett. Each FPR drop of 0.4 points increased the odds of roadside failure by a factor of about 1.6. Whereas for non-STAR stations, the odds increased by 2.4. For consumers, this means that certification by a STAR station will typically provide the greatest assurance that their vehicle's emission control systems are operating properly. And the final point, based on an updated methodology, BAR and CARB staff, or ARB staff, have estimated that in calendar year 2018, smog check could have additionally provided emission reductions on the order of 60 to 70 tons per day of reactive organic gases and oxides of nitrogen, ROG and NOx, from model years 1976 to 2012 light and medium duty gasoline vehicles if all smog check stations operated as high performing stations. And that is it.
Thank you, Greg, Garrett, and Frank. Any comments from the BAR Advisory Group? Mr. Gallo.
One thing, I'm not sure if this is working. I guess it is. One of the things I was looking at, and again, you had stated earlier that when we look at the one graph that shows the OBD fraud indicators, and we look at San Francisco as an example, then we look at Southern California, and granted, Southern California factors in a much larger vehicle population. Is there any way to redo those charts in a weighted factor based on vehicle populations to get a better reflection of what those numbers are? Because again, it's one of those, if we're trying to fix this problem with the fraudulent smog checks and everything they're trying to do, and we've had lengthy conversations, every time we think we found a way to stop them from cheating the system, they find another device that will do it. And I think for the next DAD unit, that's a heavy factor in what we have to do to stop this. But I think to just understand the populations better gives us a better opportunity to really kind of focus on, okay, where's the real problem if we're looking at a weighted factor based on vehicle population?
What we're showing right now is, this is not, when we're talking about Northern California being, far less fraud than Southern California, it's not a function of the populations. When we look at individual stations, we can tell this is where it's happening, this is where it's happening. We don't see, there are stations in Northern California, specifically in San Jose, where there are stations who exhibit some of this behavior, and then enforcement goes and addresses them. But this isn't just simply a consequence of sample size in Northern versus Southern California.
I meant basically vehicle population,
Yeah.
as to the number of cars in Southern California versus Central California versus Northern California, and that's the main thing I was focusing on.
Yeah. It's some of what we see going on, and we've seen this both in terms of Bar 97 inspections and with OIS inspections. It's very localized, and even in terms of the equipment they use to do the fraudulent activity. And so, so we see certain things, like there's certain behavioral things with Bar 97 we've only seen in a couple stations in San Jose. We've never seen it anywhere else in Northern California, and yet you see it like going crazy down in pockets of LA and that area down there.
Shut them down.
So, and that's what we're working on. And one of the things, I mean, you look at this right here, and there's these big drops that are going on there. So the program is making significant advances in what we're doing here, and we're squeezing the industry harder and harder. If you just look at trying to do, certificate buys and trying to get a vehicle undercover through systems like this, the avenues are fewer and fewer to do this. And we also see that what was not discussed in this report, for the vast majority of stations when you look at like star stations, the vast majority of stations, their behavior is getting better and better and better. And they're doing tighter and tighter inspections on vehicles. We see vehicles coming to the referee for inspections that nothing's changed on the vehicle in the last 10 years, but now they can't get a smog check station to certify something because the net has gotten tighter. But we also have this population, girding the bottom of it, that they're only in this industry to cheat. That is their sole purpose. When you start blocking inspections at that station, they just shut down until they find a new way through the system. And so those ones are the ones we're really trying to address here. And we're making significant headway on these stations. But there's always a pressure. They're always pushing hard and trying to find a new way through, because as the net gets tighter and tighter, the value per illegal smog check goes up higher and higher and higher. So it's just trying to squeeze the money out.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Okay, thank you very much. We'll move along. Our next presentation, flipping to the back side of the agenda, station wall license, a QR code demonstration. Darrell Cooper from our Technology Services branch. Remember, I mentioned it earlier in the meeting that the Technology Services branch, which Clay Leak oversees, provides both PC support as well as development of applications which are of primarily of benefit, well, all of BAR, but primarily focused on the smog program. There's an application that we've been working on to share with all of you. I think made reference to it at a prior BAR advisory group meeting, but something that would be applicable outside of the smog program. I'm not sure exactly what the setup is for this or just let Jarrell just dive into it. I'll make a quick attempt to do so. I've been somewhat concerned, I think, with media attention focused on, and it's not just BAR, but it's other licensing programs as well, the ability to identify bad actors. How do you get information in the hands of consumers quickly to be able to identify licensees who have been in trouble with a licensing entity or regulating entity such as the Bureau of Automotive Repair, looking at a number of business processes to streamline our investigative processes, our business functions in that area. There's only so much we can do internally to control some of that. Obviously, there are dependencies downstream, such as with the drafting of an accusation, that it requires our attorneys at the Attorney General's office, as well as anything downstream beyond that, once an accusation has been filed, to take that matter to hearing and do that before the Office of Administrative Hearings or an administrative law judge employed by the Office of Administrative Hearings. A lot of work that is dependent on other resources outside of the Bureau. But I'm doing everything, and we're looking at things internally to streamline our process and make sure that is as efficient as possible, to make sure we get those cases adjudicated, or at least the accusations drafted and posted to our website, and that information available to consumers. But one thing that has come up in some of the media reports is something that I've wanted to address is how do we get that information potentially in the hands of consumers prior to them going to the shop, or actually, and not after the actual repair has been performed, because by then it's too late. And one of the things that we have thought of, and it came up with one of the most unlikeliest of circumstances, I guess, or venues, is we were in a brainstorming session on our enforcement licensing modernization effort that Clay has alluded to earlier in the meeting. And we actually had a presentation and an involvement, an exercise that we involved the bar advisory group on in a prior meeting. We were doing something similar with our staff, and someone mentioned this idea of developing a QR code to be able to get information in the hands of consumers sooner. And we said, well, that's not something necessarily that has to wait for the enforcement licensing modernization project to unveil itself with a new system that's rolled out 4 or 5 years from now with a new contractor, potentially. Why can't we do something like that now? So I've instructed Clay, and Clay actually did, and I kind of walked away from that brainstorming session and said, this is something we could do now, and kind of put our heads together and talk to some of his staff who have developed a prototype, essentially, that we're interested in sharing with all of you today. And again, I think this is kind of our attempt to maybe potentially address an issue that I guess from my standpoint, I would like to see this as a way for us to address something before something is handed down to us through some other unwanted mechanism or structure. So I think we were trying to get ahead of the game and address an issue that seems to come up or crop up, as I say, through media and other avenues. That's my setup for it.
Can I take a quick crack too?
Yeah.
Appreciate that lead in. And I guess before Jarrell kind of gives us the presentation on the proposal or kind of what's on the table to talk about, I guess the point I want to make is this proposal isn't providing any additional information to consumers that's not already available. All this is doing is making it easier for them to access that information. Disciplinary history is already available online, right? We post that on our website for every station that's out there. So consumers can get that information. It's just sometimes it's difficult for certain consumers to go through the whole website to get to that data and search for that station. All we're doing is making it easier for them to get that information. Same thing with complaints. Complaints can be filed online. All this proposal is doing is making it a little bit easier for a consumer to file that complaint in a little more streamlined fashion. So that said, I'll turn it over to Jarrell and kind of walk us through the proposal and can have some discussion.
My name is Jarrell Cooper. I'm a software developer at the Bureau of Automotive Repair Technology Services branch. So all automotive repair dealers are required to post a wall license in the area visible to consumers. It's easier. Oh, sorry.
Slides.
Yeah, I'll do that instead. Sorry. This wall license contains the ARD's license number, address, expiration date, and the name of the business owner. Finding more information about the ARD requires the consumer to navigate the Bureau of Automotive Repair's public website or to call BAR. BAR is seeking input on an idea to update each ARD wall license to include a QR code that can be scanned by a mobile device to quickly access additional information about the ARD. The QR code would navigate the consumer to an ARD information page with a link to the disciplinary history for the ARD. The ARD wall license would look similar to the original wall license, but with the addition of a QR code specific to each ARD. You can see it on the bottom right corner there. And for people who are unfamiliar with the QR code, it's an image that could be scanned with a mobile device. Each one of those little blocks, white and black blocks there, is basically bits of data that your mobile device can translate and turn into text or URL for a website. So that QR code on the bottom right is basically a URL specific for that station on our public website. Once the QR code is scanned, the consumer would be directed to an ARD information page on the BAR public website. Here's an example. We just updated our state template for our public website, so it no longer would look exactly like that, but the information is the same. So it'll give you the license number, the name of the automotive repair dealer, their address, and their expiration date. Looking at this page, you see the button that says disciplinary history. So once you click that button, you would be navigated to this page. Within this button would redirect to the consumer to the DCA web license lookup page, which displays an ARD's disciplinary history. So you could find on this page, there could be a lot more information. They'll have the documents attached to the disciplinary action, what the disciplinary action was, the date and time of when it happened. Also, from the ARD information page, the consumer could also be directed to BAR's existing online complaint submission page. The ARD information could be automatically populated into the form fields to increase the accuracy of the complaint submission process. So prior to this page, you go to the complaint page and then you would have to put in the ARD information, their address, their name of it, and their phone number. Clicking that button fills in all that information for you, so it drastically speeds up the time to actually file the complaint. And that's about it.
Pretty short and sweet. Thank you very much. I know you've done a lot of work to get to this point, and I appreciate all your efforts to do so. I'm very interested to hear comments and feedback from the advisory group and others. Mr. Gallo.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation. You know, we've had a lot of discussion within the coalition and a lot of our members in different associations on the whole issue of the QR code. And in theory, it makes a lot of sense to do something like that. It's just, in the end game, what are we going to do? What are we going to achieve? If the information's already on the website, it's already accessible to consumers, you know, are we creating something more that we don't need to do? On the other hand, if somebody can actually take the time, walk up to a license, scan the QR code, get the information on the business, that information, as you pointed out, is already available, it's already out there. I think the concern that we have is if we really get down to the net of all of this, this is all being driven initially by NBC and all the focus on the recent cases that they've had their stories on, and then followed up by Assemblymember Lowe and the commitment to try and put together a grading system on the auto repair industry, which you can't do. I mean, no offense, you can't do it. It's not like a restaurant where you can go in and take temperature of food. You can look at the cleanliness of the place and so on and so forth. And so, you know, it's trying to invent something that will work for everybody. The other concern that we have is we're now in the process of adding all of these new ARDs that don't have any history. They're brand new. Oil changers and so on and so forth are just now coming into the population. So are we creating an unlevel playing field with a QR code? Looking at it in a more positive light, if we're going to do it, is there a way to look at it and say, okay, it makes sense, let's put it together, but let's put a time frame in there so that if our record retention requirements are 3 years, then maybe any history on the business goes back 3 years, and that becomes something that's on your QR code that they can go and research. As we know, businesses change owners, they change all kinds of different things, and having some old history out there may not be really all that fair to necessarily the new owner of the business. So we want to go cautiously into this and really go into it eyes wide open. But as we kind of try and find a way to help find a solution for this, let's face it, the media is never going to let go of this stuff. That's what they do. All they care about is their ratings for each period that they have. Their Nielsen rating periods for sweeps, that's all they care about is selling advertising. In the meantime, we don't need as an industry to give them more fodder for this just because they keep trying to drive their agenda on this. So I want to go into it cautiously. I want to find a way to work with the Bureau and all the stakeholders. I've always said it. If we create programs where all stakeholders win, that's all we want to do. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, John. Other comments, questions, concerns? Mr. Molodonov.
Yeah, I have a couple of just questions, maybe comments about what you said, Clay, making it easy for the consumer, and I sort of wanted to explore that a little bit. So the way the QR code reads is that it sort of streamlines the process to go to the disciplinary page. Is that basically it, a few steps? Because you can get that same information on the website now. I know you kind of sort of poo-pooed the website, but I know you've updated and spent a lot of time on that. And it's a pretty good site, by the way. You can go on there and get a lot of good information, including the disciplinary stuff. So, and I was just thinking from a consumer standpoint, usually consumers, before they go to a facility, they'll check them out if it's the first time, right? They'll Google them, they'll Yelp them, they'll maybe check your website, right? So they'll do that, all the stuff beforehand. So when you go into a facility, one of the first things you may see is the large sign, the BAR sign about consumer rights. That's a 2-foot by 2-foot sign on the wall, which says that the shop is registered and it has the 800 number and it has the website. It's all there. And some of these shops have been told that they have their own QR code where they can, you can go on their website, or you can actually, some of these shops want to be voted #1 in their area, so you can get on there and you can go on and do that. And those are usually on their calendar because they're promoting that. And then shops have licenses. This license, which is, I don't know, what is that, a 3x6 or what? They have it somewhere in the wall, maybe in the corner, maybe behind the counter, along with all their other business licenses. So I was just thinking, from a consumer standpoint, from a practical standpoint, I mean, I'm not going to end up, if I don't know the facility, I'm not going to go to the facility and start looking around for a license for a QR code to see if this, right? I'm not going to end up doing that. I'm probably going to review beforehand before I go to that facility. And I was just thinking, is it making this thing easier for the consumer? Don't they have on their phone, don't they have to download the app, maybe on some of the older phones? I don't know. I mean, I'm not a tech, but they have to download the app. They have to kind of find where the license, they have to start looking for a license, which I don't necessarily think they're going to be looking for, and then get that information. Wouldn't it just be easier to somehow to, go on the website and just get that information beforehand? So I just wanted to play that around a little bit because I just, from a practical standpoint, I don't know how efficient it is, but I just wanted to have that discussion.
Go ahead. We'll flip for it. No, no, go ahead. I'll chime in after.
So yeah, all modern phones, newer phones, contain a QR code reader as part of the photo. So you don't have to download an application in general. Some really old phones you may have to, but most current iPhones and Android devices have a QR code reader built in. So it is a feature that 95% of the general public has built into their phone already. QR codes are something we've seen a lot of adoption in, especially with more tech savvy people. QR codes have become really industry standard for obtaining sort of that website specific information. Is this the one size fits all problem to get this information into every consumer's hands? No, it's not. I mean, your observations about not every consumer is going to know to go scan that QR code, it's spot on. We're not going to get 100% of people accessing information this way. But I think we have a responsibility to get that disciplinary information to consumers every way we possibly can. And if this helps us get that information in 10% or 20% more people's hands, I think it's worth doing. So I totally understand, the points from John and yourself. This isn't a silver bullet by any stretch. It's just another way that people can get access to this information in a little bit more of a streamlined fashion.
I could see, I could see it more of a benefit to BAR in a way, because if a BAR representative's there, they can just take that information and download it on their paperwork, so they don't have to write everything out. So that could be.
That might be a benefit as well.
Oh, I see that. Yeah, because they'll know where they'll be looking for the license as opposed to the consumer. Consumer generally doesn't go in the facility start looking for a license.
My thinking on some of this, and excellent comments all the way around on this, is that you're banking on someone knowing that there's a Bureau of Automotive Repair. I bet there's a lot more people knowing what a QR code just ask my kids. I didn't know what one was, but my kids certainly do. I think that's probably, and wouldn't you want to get that information into the hands of the consumer before they've signed on the dotted line or signed on that transaction to proceed with that next the repair to their vehicle? That's the thought. And I don't know that I'm all that confident that people know that the Bureau of Automotive Repair, A, exists, and B, that there's a website where they can access this information.
If I could just make one comment. John made some suggestions as far as 3-year record limitation and all
Correct.
that. So one of the things that maybe we could do, just another option, is maybe the date of when that license was created, right? So the consumer can see how long this station has been in business, maybe on that landing page. And then the other thing, as far as when they change ownership, I believe their station license number changes. So the information as far as retaining something that happened 5 years ago, if they change ownership, I don't believe it would be.
Yeah, let me correct that, just from the standpoint that not necessarily changing ownership, but if you have a new manager of that facility, it's still the same owners of the business.
Okay.
And they brought somebody else to manage that business. That history stays there, and yet they're trying to rebuild the business and change the image of the business. And all of a sudden, there's this scarlet letter out there, literally, that somebody's going to look at. But one of the points that I also forgot to mention is, we realize in today's social media world, we're tried immediately when they're in line and they're on their smartphones, basically posting on Yelp or Google or anybody else out there. To either complain or vent their frustration with the business on what they liked. And as we know, statistics prove consumers are more apt to complain than they are to compliment. And that's just, the studies have proven that over the years. But to that point, there's so many different venues for consumers to complain that sometimes I think it creates and hamstrings the BAR, because here's an agency that's there for them to act on their behalf and to work through these things with problem locations, and they don't know that in many cases you're there.
Yeah, I appreciate the comment, and my wife's family owns a restaurant, so I sympathize. A lot more complaints than people logging onto Yelp and saying what a great meal they had, right? I guess the only point I'd make is obviously we're not publishing any complaint-related data. This is purely disciplinary history data. And that's, I guess, the only distinction I would make.
Ms. Reinhardt.
I just want to add on to what Johan was saying. So the concern, I think, from the franchise new car dealers is that if we have a customer who isn't happy with something as part of the repair experience, we want to have the opportunity to make that right. And so the part of this that is concerning for us is the big button. You know, there's only 2 buttons to press on that main screen, and it's disciplinary history, and then the big file a complaint button. And it just I mean, I appreciate trying to give consumers more access to this information and an easier avenue to file complaints, but at the same time, if they, like Johan said, immediately go on their phone when one thing goes wrong and file a complaint immediately, it makes me nervous because it doesn't give us the opportunity to try to make that customer happy and make things right before things get elevated to this level of a complaint.
Good comment. Mr. Kusa.
So I think what we need to keep in mind as a group is, this is an effort, I believe, to stop or an alternative to a legislative solution being forced down our throats that, the restaurant one, right, like we've been talking about, in our minds won't work. But if the legislature passes something where I have to have a red light, green light, yellow light in the front of my store, that's what's going to happen, right? So, I think from small business owners' standpoints, right, we want that opportunity to make sure that we can solve problems and prevent it escalating up the line. But the other side of it is I would prefer to have something that, as an industry, we're developing that would be acceptable to the consumers in the legislature rather than the other way around. And I think maybe this might be that.
It doesn't have to necessarily come with those 2 options. There are we could drop one of the options. Just want to point that out. We also could add options, potentially, maybe some things that might be perceived as more of positive in the eyes of the shop.
Request an auto body inspection, or, there's other.
Well, I'm thinking more of things that the industry would
Thumbs
be. Yeah, well, I don't know. There are things that they might get out of it. It would direct to I'm just throwing out are there any, I'm just trying to think. I don't know, out loud here.
I'll give you
Give me an example. I'm just trying to think. Is there something that would be on there that potentially you could inform the consumer about the shop? I don't know.
Yeah, well, and to that point, I think where you have the button where they can click on a complaint form to fill out. Maybe the first reference is, have you gone to the shop management to discuss your problem with them? Please check here. Okay? Because it's so easy for them to go on, and they've never talked to anybody in the business. And so, and I think going way back when the white medallion shield was being changed where it listed the barcode website, everybody's going, oh, great, now they have an 800 number. Now they have the website to complain. I go, really? You think you're going to get that many people that are going to take the time to go onto the website and complain? And I go, yeah, they are. It's easy. And so kind of keeping that in mind on the QR code and so many times I know working with bar reps over the, sad to say, 35 years I've been doing this. But the real irony is the majority of the complaint management team at bar that I've always worked with, one of the first questions that's always asked of the consumer, have you talked to the owner? Have you talked to the management of that facility? And I think if we're going to do this and maybe pilot it and say, okay, as the first right of refusal, have you talked to people in management to give them an opportunity to resolve this problem?
Yeah, good suggestion.
All right, that's a good suggestion. Other comments, questions? Anything on the webcast? No? Audience? Public? Charlie Peters.
So I guess real quick, while Charlie's coming up, the last point I'd like to make is I think I know I've been talking about Elm a lot today, even though it wasn't technically on the agenda, but a big focus of Elm and kind of modernizing not just BAR, but the state IT infrastructure and environment in general is making services available online easy to consumers, right? The whole Amazon concept where you just swipe and click, right? And you get your government service. So the concept of a QR code, I totally appreciate the discussion. Bigger picture, BAR and the vast majority of other state entities are looking to make these services available online and easy, right? That's the goal, ultimately. And Governor Newsom's made that really clear that that's his priority and his intention. So something we'll continue working towards as part of Elm as well.
Okay, thanks, Clay. And Mr. Peters.
Yes, my name is Charlie Peters. My light is on, sir. Clean Air Performance Professionals, we represent motorists, and we don't think we're getting the kind of quality and services we deserve. And we think that behaviors can change significantly at every level, but behaviors are not going to change or improve unless somebody's given an opportunity to do so. And punishment may not create that outcome. We have more black people in jail in this country than any population in the world anywhere. The amount of money that we're spending incarcerating people, even in private jails, who have been orchestrated into jail out of media action rather than doing something to improve their behavior by treating them respectfully and incorporating them in the system. And that doesn't mean that inappropriate activity is appropriate, because it's not. But if you don't start with by asking the person what they're going to do to correct a problem, you start off with an accusation, and then we got an attorney general, and we go through this process of doing a whole lot. And this cannot function properly unless, because it has potential of being very effective at improving the service to the customer and the air and the quality of business and process in the state of California. If we do it right, you first of all have to demonstrate that if you're effective at improving the system, that the basis for getting that accomplished is only one entity that can do that and do it properly, and that's the government, is the Bureau of Automotive Repair. If they're taking appropriate action to improve the behavior and improve the process, if they are given support to do that and continue that, that can continue to improve over time. The instant that you start taking money away from and support away from being able to do that, then the system is going to be depleted of funds and depleted of people to accomplish those goals. And the instant that you have that, you have a system that's 10 times as bad as we ever thought possible, because now we have better people, better educated. So we need to incorporate in this process, finding out if what's broken, finding out if in fact what's broken is getting fixed, giving people opportunity to correct that, giving them setting standards where they can now become an appropriate part of the system, go to Delancey Street in San Francisco and get a meal and see how those people tell you about how they're treated there, who are coming out as felons coming out of prison, who are providing incredible services, incredible food, and incredible process. And if you don't believe that, just ask our current governor. He participated in that process. So if we can add that to our system, we can really accomplish something. So looking to find the bad guy so we can punish him, so we can change the behavior, really sounds good, but it has never worked and probably never will. If we can incorporate an additional piece of this process, you still need to have the hammer to get people to move, but to give them an opportunity to move and to take care of their own business and become an effective part of this process, and give appropriate credit to the Bureau of Automotive Repair for orchestrating and allowing that to happen and supporting that to happen, can result in continuous improvement in support to do that, and a process that works much better for the state of California. But if we're going to continue to disregard improvements in behavior, then we aren't going to make things better, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peters. Yes, Jack, you have a response.
Just one final question on the QR code. So if it goes on the license, you don't need a regulation to implement this? Or do you need a regulation to implement this?
I don't believe a regulation is required. I don't know that we've done the full analysis, but I do not believe.
We've talked to legal counsel. No, it's nothing restricting what is the information that's on the license.
Okay, so but if the requirement was to put that QR code in on the front door of a shop, for example, would that require regulation? Is that different or is that the same?
I believe that would be different. There's already a requirement that this wall license be posted in a conspicuous area accessible to the consumer.
And it's a bar-issued wall license.
And it's a bar-issued wall license.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That would change if you put something on, required something to be placed on the building that would require regulation.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rice. Kyle, did you have something? No.
Hi, just real quick, Bud Rice Quality Tune-Up Shops, two quick comments. The first one is unintended consequences, and I think we have to kind of be mindful of that. Going back in the day when we had NOVs, the idea was those were fix-it tickets, and you could enter into a dialogue with the shop saying, this is a notice of violation, you're not quite in compliance, let's talk about that. And then those notices of violations were used to make a cottage industry of lawsuits against shops. And that wasn't what we started off thinking it was going to be, you know? So I'm concerned that even though this stuff is available on the website, I'm a little nervous about poking the bear a little bit, and all of a sudden the red light, green light thing turns into another cottage industry, and we got guys chasing us from all sides, and we're wondering what the heck happened, you know? So I have that concern. The other one is that, like Lisa was talking about a minute ago, and as she was talking, I was going, yeah, I could see that. And that's where the guy goes, did you see that coffee area? How about the restroom? Were you in there? How about the guy that was looking at me a little bit funny? And all of a sudden, you've got complaints coming from all over the place. And again, if we have an opportunity to enter into a dialogue and fix stuff, I guarantee you we're going to fix stuff. Okay, but if we get short-circuited or somebody does an end run, and all of a sudden we got a bunch of complaints that are coming off because someone's going click click, we just got to keep an eye on it. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Good comments. Thank you very much, Bud. Other comments, questions before we move into our final agenda items? Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate all the feedback. I mean, obviously, this is something we didn't want to throw out there, and would never do that without getting a lot of input. We're going to go back and discuss some of the comments and issues that have been raised today. But thank you for the feedback. Appreciate it. Thank you both for the presentation.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate the input as well.
All right, we have Kevin Likas with, I hope I'm pronouncing his last name correctly, with the Automotive Service Excellence, going to give us a presentation on the online training presentation program that's being developed or has been rolled out. I'm not exactly sure where we are with all of this, but Kevin, welcome. Is Kevin Likas? Okay, well, welcome. And I think there's a button at the bottom to make sure your mic is on, and we'll turn it over to you. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kevin Likas. I'm a project manager with Automotive Service Excellence, or ASE, and we have developed a new program that is going to make life a little bit easier for ASE certified technicians. And our new program is called My ASE Renewal. And the My ASE Renewal program is a different pathway that technicians can utilize for maintaining certifications that they have currently earned. As of prior to this program, there were two distinct pathways that technicians would follow to gain certification. One would be to go in for the initial test. So they would go into the testing center and they would take their test and they would earn their initial credential. Required 2 years of experience to earn that credential. And then after 5 years, the credential had to be recertified. So the technician could go back in and take another test, and their credential would be extended for an additional 5 years. Well, the My ASE Renewal Program is a convenient way for technicians to maintain their certifications without having to go to testing centers. And what our data has shown to us is that 90% of the technicians who come in to recertify, in fact, pass their certifications. The recertification process is not really moving the needle very much as far as trying to weed out technicians that do not have the skills. And that's simply because technicians at that point have got 7 years of experience under their belt, and they are going to be able to go through the tests with very little difficulty. So we developed a program, and we ran it through a beta process. And this piloted last year for 6 months. We had about 325 technicians that participated in this. Technicians came from various segments of the industry. They were in dealerships, they were in independent shops, things of that nature. And they participated in the program, and we were able to find out if this program would work. And there was a very high success rate that occurred when we were going through this. And so if you can imagine ASE recertification that works differently, and it is going to be something that can be done at the technician's leisure. It's something that they could do from home. This is something they can do from the shop. This is something they can do on a mobile device. This is something that they could do from a PC. And what we've decided to do is we have created a mobile app. And currently, the app is in a testing phase. We're in a beta test right now. Our beta test is scheduled to go through 2020, the end of 2020. And the beta test is having technicians that are actually subscribing to our app. And what's happening is the technicians will go and create an account. They will then we will begin to send them questions either to their mobile device or to a PC app, and they will be able to then answer those questions on their device. Now, for each question that the technician answers correctly, they will earn 1 point, and once a technician earns 8 points, the certification will be extended 1 calendar year. And so instead of having that 5-year cycle that's going on, this is going to be an annual event that will occur with the technicians. Now, one of the things that we're going to be doing differently that we haven't done before, if I can get it, there we go. We're going to be actually giving the technicians feedback based on the answers they have selected. If they have chosen an answer incorrectly, we're going to explain to them why that answer was incorrect. We're also going to be able to identify the correct answer for them and explain to them why that answer is correct. And that's one of the chief complaints that we have received from a lot of technicians is that when they go in and they take the tests, they don't know what they got right, they don't know what they got wrong, they don't know where to go, they don't know what to do, and typically this is something that we do not provide feedback to them for. So the app is going to be able to do exactly that. Secondly, what we're going to be doing with the app is the content of the app is going to be focusing in on technology that is more leading edge. Typically, with ASE tests, our questions are based on technology that's at least 4 years old or older. And this way, all technicians are going to be able to answer those questions, and it's not going to favor a technician, for example, in a dealership that is going to be seeing some of that newer technology, where an aftermarket technician has not had an opportunity to see so. So with this app, we're going to be going with the leading edge technology and the technology that the technicians are not familiar with. And what happens is, in most cases, they are going to get these questions wrong. But that's okay. We're going to provide them the feedback, help them to understand and learn that they have that deficiency in their knowledge. The hope is then they go out and try to learn a little bit more about that technology. When a technician does get a question incorrect, we are going to send them an additional question approximately 30 days later. And so they are going to have a second chance. And again, hopefully they've gone out and they've learned a bit about this so that it'll be more familiar. The second chance question will also be based upon similar content to the question that they got incorrect. So we're trying to drive home the key pieces of information that the technician was struggling with, again, in an effort to try to make the technician a better technician going forward. In the event that that second chance question didn't do the trick, we are going to offer up to a third chance. So basically, technicians are going to have 3 chances per question family to answer a question correctly, and in the event that they do not answer all 3 questions correctly, well then unfortunately they are not going to have that opportunity to earn those points. But over that 12-month time period, we're requiring them to earn 8 points, and if you do the math simply, we're giving them 36 opportunities over a 12-month time period to earn 8 points. So we believe that this is something that is going to be easily achievable for the technicians to perform. Here's an example of what the questions are going to look like within the app. Now, the questions themselves are all brand new. These questions are not related in any way to any of the current content that is in our computer-based testing. So this was all brand new content, and again, it is focusing in on much newer technology or technology that technicians tend to have a tendency to struggle with. The questions are developed by industry experts, and they represent all different facets of the industry. So they're coming from manufacturers, the aftermarket, educators, and they're the ones that are helping to create the content that is found within the app. But as you can see with the example on the board here, the questions talking about the red ABS light on a vehicle and the answer choices, they are listed there below. There is a discussion thread that is a part of this app. And if you look just to the lower left-hand side, the little comment bubble down there, technicians can actually click on that and leave comments about the question, whether they disagree with it, they don't like it, or they don't understand what's going on. And this provides direct feedback to ASC as well as to their peers. And what we have been finding is that technicians have actually been talking with one another, and they are kind of educating themselves. So one technician says, I've never seen this before, this doesn't make any sense. And somebody else will pop in and give an example of where it does make sense and where it is happening, and it just happens to be that they haven't seen those type of things before. We've also incorporated a private Facebook group, and so the technicians have the ability to get in there and dialogue with each other as well. And this group is only available to subscribers to the MyASC renewal app. So again, what we're trying to do with our program here is trying to make technicians smarter, make them better every day. And the real drive behind this app is about learning. We're trying to get technicians to learn their deficiencies, to understand things that maybe they need to seek more training on, and then actually go out there and do that. This does not change the way that certification works, however. So if technicians do not want to use the app, they still have the ability to go through and recertify during regular pathway or get their regular certifications. And this program currently, because we are in this beta test, is only available for the automobile series. So A1 through A8 currently. We are planning on releasing A9 a little bit later on in the year, and then those tests will be available for technicians at that point. A common question that we get around all of this is around security, because ASC for the last 47 years has been all about security and going into secure testing facilities. And with this program, we're taking a little bit of a different approach. As we talked about a moment ago, the technicians that are participating in this program typically have at least 2, and in a lot of cases, 7 years of experience before they get into the program itself. And so we're less concerned about the security. We have employed a company called CAL-VISTA that is actually going out and searching the internet for us on a daily basis, looking for our content for any type of copyright infringements that are possibly occurring. And to this date, and they've been searching for us since the first of the year, there has not been one copyright infringement that they have found. So either they're doing a really good job or it's just not happening out there, one or the other. But we are trying to do everything we can to try to make things secure. The questions themselves are randomized, so not everybody is going to receive the same question. And as we were talking about, the questions come in families of 3. So I could have somebody that, for example, is getting an engine repair question, and there's 3 different questions for that first month possibly that the persons could get. But the other part of it is they are spread over that 12-month time period. So Technician A could be getting the January question, Technician B could be getting the December question. And then the 3 questions within that grouping would be what they receive. So we've tried to make it as challenging as possible without trying to make it so difficult that technicians are just saying, forget it, we don't want anything to do with this. So in conclusion, the program itself is an extension of our pilot program that we ran last year. We are currently in the beta. It started the end of January of this year and is scheduled to go through December of 2020. Currently, it includes the A1 through the A8 tests. There's a subscription fee, and it's an annual flat fee of $48. And so this is going to include all of the automobile series tests, regardless of the number of tests that the technician has earned. If they've earned more, then it's the same price. If they have less, it's the same price, but we're hoping that they're going to want to try to earn more certifications going forward in the future. As we talked about, there's a private Facebook group, which is a great direct contact with ASC for technicians. And as we've been talking about here today, technology has been something that has been threaded within a lot of these presentations, and this is where ASC is going as well, trying to incorporate technology into what we are doing. Again, we are in a proof of concept and acceptance phase, and this will be up to our board of directors as to whether this is going to go forward. A very common question that we receive right away is, what other tests are going to be available? When can I get my G1 test? When can I have the L series tests? So on and so forth. And at this point, we can't answer those questions because this program is still in this proof and acceptance phase. If this program does get approved to go into production, then at that point, we'll start making plans for adding additional test series into it. But at this point, that's just putting the cart before the horse. The one program that we get a lot of feedback about is about L1, and I know that is a program that is probably near and dear to a lot of you around here, especially with the smog and emissions certifications going on. And we don't know if we're going to be able to do L1 or not. That's going to be a very unique challenge. We are trying to do this in a mobile environment, so technicians can use laptops, PCs, their phones, anything like that, and trying to make L1 work in that environment is going to be very challenging because of the composite vehicle requirements that go on there. I'm not saying that it's not going to be impossible, but it is something we've got to take a really good hard look at, and we've got to work with industry to try to make sure that we come up with something that's going to be fair and equitable for everybody involved. So, but again, I want to thank you for your time, and that's it.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Very interesting. I'm excited to see this rolled out. Is it's in beta test in California, or is it just is this other states, or?
It's in beta test nationwide.
Nationwide. Okay.
And technicians will sign up for it. They will not sign up for it at the ASC portal. They actually are going to go to myascrenewal.com. And the reason for this is ASC is not an app supplier or an app developer. So we've hired a third-party vendor to create the app for us. And so because we were in this testing phase, the most cost-effective way to do this was to have technicians that wanted to participate go to this third-party vendor's website. All they need to do is create an account with their ASC ID. And then that way we can link their ASC record to the app itself, and then they'll be able to go forward with it. The plans are that if this goes into full production, then they will simply go through the ASC portal, and it'll be a one-stop shop. They can just sign up for the app and whatever they want, and it'll be a way to go. But as of right now, myascrenewal.com is where they would go to create an account.
Well, I appreciate you being here because this is a great opportunity for us to reach out to the industry on this, but is there other ways we can help you with this? Information on our website, we have a newsletter that goes out in the fall.
Absolutely. Any way that we can get this information out has been very beneficial. Right now, we've got about 3,000 participants that are involved with it right now, and we are continuing to market. We were targeting specific audiences initially, and the aperture has widened, and the net is being cast out further. So anything that you can do to put it out there for us, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Take a look at that. Any other comments, questions, Mr. Escalambre?
Yeah, Rick Escalambre, California Auto Teachers. Kevin, the question, what if it's tech is a master? Will they get a rotating, same amount of points regardless of how many certifications they have? They have to hit that 8?
It's 8. They have to answer 8 questions per certification.
Per certification.
So a master technician is actually going to receive 8 questions to their mobile device or PC a month, and then they have to answer 8 questions per certification area.
Okay, and you mentioned L1 being difficult because of composite vehicle. How about the electrical with the diagram heavy on the recert?
Okay, that's a great question. The questions, when they come through on the app, they are timed. And so there is a 2-minute timer that's available for the more contextual-based questions, and then questions that have charts, schematics, anything like that, there's a 5-minute timer on it. From a mobile device, they have the ability to pinch and zoom and do things like that. On a PC, it's a little bit easier that they can do that, but the schematics have been formatted and created for a mobile device, so we have tried to really get rid of all the unnecessary stuff that is on a schematic, so it's just focusing in on the pertinent information that is there for them, but they do get that additional time when a schematic is present.
Thank you. Mr. Kusa.
So Dave Kusa, ASCCA. So I'm a shop owner. So as a shop owner that pays for my techs to take the tests, I appreciate that. It help reduce the cost. I also think the ongoing learning process is great. But you missed it, and here's why. That's fantastic. what's going to keep 10 guys from working together to take the test so that he passes?
Absolutely nothing. But the thing is, as far as we're concerned, learning is occurring. So if they are going together and they're sitting about talking about something and talking about a concept or talking about a procedure, a good example is going to be an internal heat exchanger. This is a relatively new component for our 1234YF air conditioning systems. A lot of technicians are not familiar with this. And so if you and I are trying to take this test and we sit down and start talking about this, I don't know what this is. Well, I don't know what this thing is either. So now they're both going in and learning about it. And when that other technician receives that question, then they are going to be prepared for it as well. So again, we've seen with our statistics have shown us that these guys have, or these technicians have lots of experience under their belt. And the recertification process is really not moving the needle. And so now we're pushing into an area that we have never gone into before, and we're getting more towards that leading edge thing, trying to help these guys become a better technician every day. Thank you.
Other comments, questions? Yes, Ms. McKernan.
So do they only get questions on a monthly basis if they've missed a question? Or is this just a continual learning process?
This is a continuous learning process, and we are trying to keep continuous engagement going on. The program is set up to every 30 days deliver them a question. If they get a question incorrect, then 30 days after they answer that incorrect question, they receive their second chance item. So for example, let's say for the month of July 1st, your question came out. You waited until July 15th to answer it. So on July 15th, you answered it wrong. That second chance item is going to come 30 days after that. However, your August 1st question will still arrive on August 1st. So it creates a two-channel path for these questions to go through. The web application of this has got a really nice little dashboard that shows the technicians when they get them wrong, which ones are going to be coming next and which ones are going to be coming in the future. See, they can identify, I got a second chance question coming on this date. I've got my regular question showing up on this date, where with the app version of it, we just tell them the next date that their question is going to arrive. And there's just not enough space to provide all this information. Thank you. You're welcome.
Mr. Ritz.
So if you wanted to have both, would it be 2 subscriptions?
No, it's one subscription, and there's basically 3 different ways to take a look at this. We do support Android as well as Apple, and then we have the web-based version of it as well.
Yes, Mr. Robinette.
Do these questions time out if they get one question per month and they, as you said, maybe waited till the middle of the month to answer? That's one scenario. If they get into the next month and they've still not answered that question or performed on that at all, does that accumulate with yet another question and that kind of builds out to where they may have a group of them, or does that time out?
Once the technician starts a question, it can time out at that point. Otherwise, if we've delivered them a question, they have not answered it, they will pile up and they will continue to do so. We are doing everything in our power to try to help technicians to understand this is not the best way to do this, that we want technicians to understand this is about continuous engagement with ASE. But if a technician chooses to do so, we can't really stop them in any way, shape, or form. But the risk that they run into is getting to the end of their subscription and not possibly have earned enough points to then earn that extension on their credential. And then with that 30-day waiting period for a second chance question to come up, unfortunately, in that type of a situation, we can't help the technician at that point.
Okay, so once they engage in the question, that's a timed question response opportunity.
Yes, that's correct.
And then if they have not engaged, it just sits kind of in a queue.
That is correct. They'll see a number. It'll appear on their phone. We're doing push notifications for technicians doing questions on a mobile device. So they'll receive a notification that says, hey, you got a new question that's available to you. They go into the app itself, and then up in the corner in orange, there'll be a 1, a 2, a 3 that identifies the number of questions that are available to them. But once they have selected that question, there is a countdown that's going to occur. Are you sure you want to do this? And it says, whoa, get me out of here. And it'll go 3, 2, 1. The question starts. And then once that question is now visible, the timer is going. And when that timer runs out, whether they answer or not, that question is then going to be finished. If they do not answer, then obviously the question is going to be scored incorrectly.
That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Anything on the webcast? Nothing? Okay. Thank you very much, Kevin, for being here. A very exciting program you're developing, and we'll look for ways to assist with the outreach to the industry beyond our meeting today. Thank you. Denise Cunningham with our Consumer Assistance Program to elaborate on a proposal that was first broached with before our advisory group here. I can't remember. Whoever wants to take credit may do so. I think it was Mr. Para, in fact, but there may have been someone else who also champions this effort, and I think we were very excited to see what we could do to assist in this effort. Thank you, Denise.
All right, good afternoon, actually. Well, since this idea was brought to our attention some 15 months ago at one of these advisory group meetings, a lot of folks at BAR and Air Resources Board and others have expressed a lot of support for the idea, and everybody's pretty excited about this. So let me move this. How do I get this to go? There we go. So through this program, BAR is going to provide retired vehicles to publicly funded automotive schools, both publicly funded automotive technical training programs in high schools, community colleges, regional occupational programs. Is that not picking up? Sorry.
Not very loudly.
Okay, so we're going to be working with high schools, community colleges, regional occupational programs. The program goals, what we're hoping to achieve with this is to provide students additional hands-on training opportunities, to increase the types of vehicles that are available for instructional purposes, to help contribute to the quality automotive technical education, to contribute to the quality of automotive repair in California, and we hope to contribute to the smog check program repair effectiveness. When we looked at this, our objectives are to provide 350 retired vehicles annually to schools throughout the state. We wanted to establish a process that minimized costs for the schools, for the dismantlers, and for BAR. We wanted to allow the schools to request specific types of vehicles, makes and models, and a range of model years. We wanted to, of course, we had to ensure that the retired vehicles used in the program are not driven on California roads, that they can't become a significant source of pollution again. We've already paid to get them off the roads. We don't want them back on the roads. As part of this, we have to track the vehicles to ensure that they're permanently scrapped after a designated period of time. So we tried to keep this process as simple as possible. Basically, a school signs a memorandum of understanding with BAR. The school submits a request for one or more vehicles from BAR, noting the year, make, model. They can give us a range of acceptable makes, models, and years. At that point, we'll place a request in the database that we share with the dismantlers. Then once the car comes in at a location that's fairly near the school, then we'll notify the school that the requested vehicle is available. At that point, as long as the school is still interested in taking the vehicle, the dismantler is going to obtain a non-revivable junk receipt. And that's going to mean the vehicle can never be registered again. It can't be used on California roads again under any circumstances. DMV will not re-register a vehicle once it has a non-revivable junk receipt. At that point, the dismantler will transfer ownership via a $0 bill of sale to the school. The school will be responsible for transporting the vehicle to their location at their own cost, and they would need to do so either by car carrier or by tow truck. The school will need to return the vehicle to the dismantler by May 31st of 2022. And the reason why that date is important is because our contract with the dismantlers, our current contract ends on July 1 of 2022. These are 3-year contracts. In order for the dismantlers to get the value of the scrap steel from the vehicles, the cars have to go back before the end of the contract period. Now, there's nothing to say if this program is successful, there's nothing to say that the schools can always apply for more programs. I would assume that if it is successful, we're going to be putting in something in our contracts with the dismantlers into the next contract with the dismantlers as well. And once again, we'll track and monitor the usage and the disposition of the vehicle. The objectives we've achieved so far are, we've written this into the contract with the dismantlers. Effective July 1, all dismantlers, as part of their contract, that they will supply us with up to 10 vehicles per year per site. We have 35 sites throughout California, so that's 350 vehicles per year over a 3-year contract, which adds up to a little over 1,050 vehicles. We have developed the process that we just went through. We've completed the vehicle database, and an MOU, or a Memorandum of Understanding, between the schools and the Bureau was drafted and approved. So we are basically set to go on this. So the next steps, we would like to test the process with a few interested schools. We're hoping that some will volunteer. But we'd like to test the process either this summer or this fall. Maybe we'll work any bugs out of it that are in it. And once we do that, we're going to reach out to the various high schools that have the high schools and community colleges with automotive programs, and attempt to well, at least provide them with the information, and they can make a decision whether they want some of these vehicles or not. We would envision that these vehicles could be used for a variety of programs: auto body programs, drivability, diagnostics, electrical, and so forth. There is no requirement that the vehicles have to be intact totally when they come back to the dismantler. We do want all the pieces. We want the scrap metal weight to go back, but if the students chop the car up, with a couple of exceptions like the radio and the tires, we ask that those be maintained, but otherwise they can pretty much work with the car as they need to learn. So we will conduct outreach, and we will find a mechanism to provide access to the MOU, and it's possible that we might be able to provide the blank MOUs on our website so that they can be downloaded by the schools and filled out and sent in to us. And that concludes the presentation. Anybody has any questions?
Thank you very much, Denise. Any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Escalante.
Yeah, I think if we could help with the California Automotive teachers, we could get it out through our webmaster almost immediately, at least get the word out to 350 members. That's not going to encompass everybody in the state, but it will at least start it. We can get in the CAT newsletter, which would be another start. So anything help we can give you on that basis, let us know.
Very much appreciated, and I know that George Ritz and Ruben Parra and I have talked about that, and I think we have some plans to do that.
Mr. Ritz?
And I can supply a list of the colleges that have automotive programs, but the high schools, since I've been a member of CAP, we've been trying to get a list.
Yes.
And it's really difficult. I know that the Department of Ed has one that's about 4 years old, and Robert Wilson is reluctant to hand it out because it hasn't been maintained. And, you know, as an example, I was trying to get a list of the high schools in Marin and Sonoma counties together, and I thought I had the list, and then somebody called me, oh, we're changing 2 teachers in our district. So it's, you know, it's hard to maintain that. But, you know, I can supply with the community colleges.
Yeah, that'd be great. I think any information we can get, I believe when we had our phone conversation with, I believe it's Wendy Lutko, or Lutko down in Pasadena City College, she had indicated that she thought she might have some information on the high schools, and
Yes.
so I'll be talking to her about that, and using whatever mechanisms we have, we might reach out to the Department of Education or something like that and see if they have some information.
So as soon as you can put something together that we could put on our website, it could go out, you know,
Okay.
immediately.
And I would say that could probably be within the month. As I say, everything has been approved at this point. We'll need to write up a summary of the program for your site, and I think we can supply a form-ready memorandum of understanding that you perhaps in a PDF form that could be posted on the site, and the school can download it if they're interested, fill out their name and all that, and send it in to us. I was advised by some folks I talked to, I remember in our discussion a few months ago, there was some concern that I guess the various program administrators were going to have to look at the memorandum of understanding themselves and make sure that they're comfortable with it.
Yeah, that'd probably be an issue with most of the boards and some of the administrators. From school district to school district, it's going to vary. So we use some of the manufacturer ones. We just tweak it from there. So that'd be something to look at too.
Okay.
The thing, it was Elisa that made the suggestion, so thank you for
Elisa,
doing that.
sorry.
And Denise, thank you for all the work. You know,
My
been a lot of
apologies,
people
Elisa.
involved and a lot of time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and like I said, I think everybody, once we heard that, once that came up at that meeting, and I do think it was 15 months ago, everybody thought it was a great idea. It was a positive idea. It's something we can do to help, and we're happy to do it.
Thank you for pointing that out, Elisa. You deserve all the credit. And obviously George and Rick and Ruben, who have also been instrumental in moving this forward, and your office as well. Thank you, Denise. Anything else on that one?
I was just going to
Oh, yeah.
thank you, George, for that. And I just want to commend you. I mean, the speed at which you got this accomplished, I think, is maybe unprecedented with state agencies. So we really, really appreciate it. I'm really excited.
Thank you.
One of those win-win-wins for everybody, I think. One celebrate for everyone.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Denise.
Impressive.
All right. The agenda. Enforcement statistics update, that's a handout only. It's in your packages. The presentation is also at the front of the room if you didn't pick that up. Moving on to public comment on items not on the agenda. Before we get there, I just want to point out, someone pointed out to me while we were in the midst of going through the last 2 presentations from Mr. Likas and Denise here. I'll go back to the station wall license QR code demonstration. There was an obvious typo that was a complete oversight on my part. I don't know if you can load it up there. And we'll fix this before we load all of the presentations to our website later this week or first part of next week. You guys go offline, you went dark here. I think maybe this was some of the confusion. We don't post complaint history on our website, and yet a slide seems to indicate that we do. Slide 6. And this will be corrected. Okay, I don't know how this got by me, but I look at the words and not necessarily the titles of some of these slides, apparently. But that should say disciplinary history, not complaint history.
Yeah.
That's a big oversight on my part and our staff's, my part, excuse me. Just our staff will update that. Well, Zach has already done so. Thank you to Shelley Whitaker for pointing that out to me as I was sitting up here thinking, how did that happen? All right. Now, public comment on items not on the agenda. Anyone from the advisory group? Yes, Mr. Molodonov.
Yeah, Jack Molodonov. The next advisory group meeting is October, I believe, and I know sometimes you announce workshops ahead of time because people are making schedules and so forth. So, are we planning on having a workshop that afternoon?
Yes. Okay. And there are a couple of items on the table, one of which is a follow-up to our collision repair workshop that was held in April and draft regulations that we had vetted with our attendees. That is one item. The other one was Mr. Alan Morrison wanted to workshop some draft regulations. What is it? What fluid? Transmission fluid. Yeah, from the Weights and Measures group at the Department of Food and Agriculture. And that is another. We might be able to squeeze two in. I think the one on our collision repair could be a short workshop. We've made a number of internal and are currently working on to address all of the comments we've received at the April workshop. Made some changes I think will be, my hope is, positively received by all. And I think that would be a fairly quick workshop, maybe 30 to 60 minutes. And then we could move right into the workshop with Mr. Morrison. That was the time frame. We were looking at July, today's meeting, to have a workshop with Mr. Morrison, but he felt that October was going to be a better time frame for him to pull all the information relative to their regulations together. So, yes, those are the two workshops that are on the table for October's meeting, or following on our October 17th meeting. Anything else?
Pat, just to follow up on that, we're working with some of the oil providers to try and get them to that meeting because we think it's critical to have them there as well. Because otherwise, we can put together a standard with Alan and his group and everything on weights and measures, and all of a sudden the oil providers can't deliver. So we think it's critical that we get the oil providers there to that workshop. So as soon as we can confirm that that is set for October, we'll keep working to get them there at the table with us.
I appreciate that. And along those lines, we'll be also, I think Mr. Morrison has indicated that his reach to the industry is somewhat limited, and he's going to be somewhat reliant on efforts like yours and the Bureau of Automotive Repairs to post information about the workshop with our interested parties. Other comments, questions for items not on the agenda, excuse me. Anything on the webcast? Anyone from the audience? Okay. The last item is to announce formally the next Bar Advisory Group meeting will be Thursday, October 17th, 2019. That'll be our final advisory group meeting for this calendar year. It'll be in, is it this room or this room? Unless we get bumped, and sometimes that happens, so do not rely on that and stay tuned to the public notice that will be sent to all advisory group members as well as all of our interested parties. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we ran a few minutes over, about 10 minutes over, but I appreciate everyone's attendance, participation, a very jam-packed meeting, and very, very big ideas on the table that were, what's that? Oh, I am. You gave me an extra half hour. Well, let's keep going. I'm just kidding. Finished early. We usually adjourn at 12:30, but I anticipated well, I guess, with Zach, and we gave us an extra half hour. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, the rest of your summer. We'll see you in October. We're adjourned. Thank you. Wow. I'd forgotten.
I thought it was 1 o'clock.
Somehow I had some insight, I guess, that this was going to be a busy meeting.